Cassandra was only 20 when everything she held dear, her pack, her mate, her future, was cruelly ripped away. Losing it all at such a tender age felt like the premature end of her life, but that was the harsh reality she faced. She had made her choice, willingly bartering her soul to the devil with eyes wide open, or more accurately, making a wish and accepting its consequences. It wasn't as though no one had warned her. Cassandra had been visiting the magician since childhood, pleading for him to grant her deepest desires. He hadn't outright refused her then, indeed. He couldn't deny any client who insisted, but he had tried repeatedly to dissuade her. Over the years, his warnings had succeeded in swaying her multiple times. But 3 days ago, desperation drove her back to that small, shadowy shop on the corner of the street, the kind of place people avoided looking at too directly as they hurried past. This time, she hadn't wavered. She made her wish, fully aware of the cost, yet utterly unprepared for how much it would hurt. The pain consumed her. Every step away from home tore at her heart. Saying goodbye to her brother, to the packmates who had raised her, shredded what little remained of her spirit. Growing up, she had always expected to lead them to become their alpha, someone strong and indispensable. Now, because of her wish, because of Sebastian, she was nothing. Not even herself anymore. Cassandra's hatred for Sebastian began when she was just 8 years old. Even now, years later, not even emotional maturity could dull the sheer loathing she felt whenever she saw his stupid mop of brown hair. Her own hair, golden wheat under sunlight, shimmered brilliantly when the sun shone through the trees where she played. She took immense pride in it, especially since her mother, despite protests, allowed her to grow it long below her shoulders in thick curls. Such vanity might have seemed impractical for someone destined to be a fighter, but Cassandra was as fierce in battle as she was proud of her appearance. That's why Sebastian's prank infuriated her so deeply. Without warning, he stuck a piece of gum chewed far longer than necessary into her precious locks. Looking back, what infuriated her most wasn't just the act itself, but the fact that she hadn't seen it coming. Her parents had warned her about Sebastian and his mischief, but Cassandra didn't listen. Perhaps she should have. After all, her pack shared a border with Sebastian's deep within the woods, a boundary born out of an ancient division. Once upon a time, both clans belonged to the same powerful pack. Decades earlier, 2 wolves next in line to become alpha had fought over the same mate, fracturing not only their friendship but also their unity. What remained were 2 halves, each blaming the other for their misfortunes. Despite this history, Cassandra, her brother, and their wolf companions found joy in the forest, reveling in its beauty and freedom. But none of that mattered now. The bond between their packs was tenuous at best, strained by generations of resentment. And Sebastian, he represented everything Cassandra despised: arrogance, recklessness, and an infuriating ability to get under her skin. Yet here she was, years later, bound to him by forces beyond her control. The irony wasn't lost on her. All those childhood taunts and pranks had evolved into something darker, heavier. Their fates intertwined in ways neither of them could have foreseen. Her journey toward vengeance started early, fueled by every slight, every insult, every moment Sebastian made her feel small. By the time she reached adulthood, her hatred for him had hardened into something immutable. Or so she thought. Life, however, has a way of unraveling even the strongest convictions. When Cassandra stood before the magician, desperate enough to make her wish, she believed she was sealing Sebastian's fate. Instead, she sealed her own. The weight of her decision bore down on her relentlessly, forcing her to confront truths she'd rather ignore. As days turned into weeks, Cassandra struggled to reconcile the person she once was with the stranger staring back at her in the mirror. Gone was the fiery girl with golden hair and dreams of leadership. In her place stood someone hollowed out, grappling with guilt, regret, and the crushing realization that revenge rarely brings satisfaction. Still, she clung to fragments of her former self, her determination, her resilience, her refusal to surrender entirely. If there was one thing Cassandra knew how to do, it was fight, and fight she would, against the consequences of her wish, against the fractured relationships haunting her past, and perhaps, eventually, against the part of herself that still burned with anger toward Sebastian. What lay ahead was uncertain. Could she reclaim pieces of her old life? Could she mend the broken ties with her pack or find redemption in the eyes of those she loved? These questions lingered unanswered, swirling in her mind like leaves caught in a storm. For now, Cassandra walked alone, burdened by choices she couldn't undo and a future she couldn't predict. But somewhere deep inside, a spark remained, a flicker of hope that maybe, just, she could rewrite her story. Cass loved adventuring in the woods and often encountered children from the rival pack, naturally ending up playing with them. However, when she innocently told her parents about these games, they vehemently discouraged her from engaging with the other children again. Her parents warned her that if the children were anything like the other members of the Silver Pine Pack, whatever that meant, they weren't worth Cass's time. Especially not Sebastian, the Alpha's son. Cass was taken aback because she had quite liked Sebastian. He had shown her how to skip stones more effectively and could build the best huts she had ever seen. Still, since her father insisted she should be making better friends, Cass devised a strategy to justify her hangouts with Sebastian and his friends, besting the rival pack. What had started as innocent fun between the children quickly escalated into aggressive attempts to outdo each other. Nights were spent devising strategies, peers were briefed to focus and put more energy into the games, and everyone became fiercely competitive. Defeat was no longer an option, it was unacceptable. On the day Sebastian put his gum in Cass's hair, the game had been one of tree climbing. The goal was simple: compete with the other team to see who could reach the top more quickly. All participants' times would be accumulated, and the team with the lower score would win. Unfortunately for Cass, performances were incredibly tied, and it all came down to the two last contestants to determine the winner. Cass went first, reaching the top in record time. To her horror, Sebastian proved even more efficient during his turn. Natural. She did what any wolf would have done and threw a small pebble at his back, causing him to miss a step, fall, and lose the race. That's cheating, Sebastian protested once he got back on his feet, though there was never any real concern since he was a werewolf. Cass stuck her tongue out at him. If it isn't in the rule book, it's not cheating. We don't have a rule book, Sebastian argued. Exactly. Now don't be a sore loser and proclaim us the winners, Cass commanded, earning herself an eruption of triumphant screams from her packmates. She knelt down beside Sebastian, expecting him to place a crown of twigs and flowers on her head, a gesture considered the highest honor in the children's collective minds. Instead, Sebastian spat his gum right onto Cass's head, making her eyes widen in shock. Sorry, it slipped, the boy smirked. Cass began screaming, trying to get the gum out but only managing to entangle it further within her curls. Sebastian laughed, finding the entire spectacle highly entertaining, not just because it served Cass right for cheating, but also because he had never thought she'd get so upset over something as trivial as her hair. Then tears welled up in Cass's eyes. Her distress mounted, and she froze, unsure of what to do next. Sebastian's laughter faded as he realized she was genuinely upset. Hey, he said, kneeling beside her. It's just gum, we can get it out. But Cass wasn't listening. She felt humiliated, angry, and betrayed. How could he do this to her? They were supposed to be friends at least. That's what she had always thought. The realization hit her hard. Maybe her parents were right. Maybe the children from the rival pack weren't worth her time after all. But deep down, she knew it wasn't just about the gum or the game. It was about belonging to her pack, to her family, to herself. Sebastian tried to apologize again, but Cass pushed him away. She ran back to her packmates, leaving behind the tangled mess of emotions and gum in the trees. From that day forward, their games took on a new intensity. The innocence of childhood replaced by rivalry and pride. Yet, despite everything, neither Cass nor Sebastian could forget the bond they had once shared, even if neither would admit it aloud. The woods remained a battleground, but somewhere beneath the surface, a quiet longing lingered for friendship, understanding, and perhaps forgiveness. 10 seconds passed before he felt a pang of regret for his actions. That is until Cass lunged at him, her fist connecting with his jaw. Chaos erupted. Cassandra would meet the magician for the first time a month later, shortly after her 9th birthday, a meeting that was far from her last. By the time Cass turned 11, she finally achieved the revenge she had long sought. It wasn't as though she hadn't tried before. There had been the stolen pet incident, during which Cass and her brother hid their beloved hedgehog, sending themselves a ransom note signed by Sebastian. The plan forced the falsely accused culprit into publicly apologizing for something he hadn't done. It was a clever scheme. But Sebastian retaliated with an even better one. He crafted a fake apology letter allegedly written by Cass, detailing every supposed wrongdoing she'd committed over the past few months, faking a kidnapping, tampering with their pack's crop, and spreading rumors about Sebastian and his family. Sebastian's parents quickly believed these fabricated accusations, many of which were loosely based on real hardships their pack had endured. They confronted Cass's parents in a communal gathering involving other packs, which devolved into a shouting match. Throughout the chaos, Cass stood frozen, overwhelmed and speechless. This back and forth continued for 2 years, with Cass devising new forms of revenge only for Sebastian to counter each attempt with something even more elaborate. The cycle seemed endless until Cass turned 11. Her 11th birthday coincided with Sebastian's 13th, and like every 13-year-old wolf in the region, Sebastian was set to compete in a traditional full-day hunt in the woods. This rite of passage occurred annually, and everyone expected the young wolf who returned with the largest and most impressive bounty to be awarded a prize, bringing great honor to his pack. In everyone's eyes, there was no question that Sebastian, known for his hunting skills, would emerge victorious. Though Cass wasn't old enough to participate, this event presented her with the perfect opportunity to exact her revenge. Determined to win despite the odds, she began planning weeks in advance. This led her to visit the magician once more. Cass entered Adrian's shop filled with the fiery resolve of righteous fury, explaining that she wanted him to make her strong enough to triumph. "You're willing to risk losing your darling twin brother over this?" Adrian asked, raising an eyebrow. "I'd take you for being so lazy." "I'm not lazy," Cass protested, clenching her fists. "Then why come to me with this request when you could win the hunt by owning your skills the traditional way?" Cass hesitated, biting her lip. She was about to admit that she didn't believe she could win on her own, that she was younger, less skilled, and simply not good enough, but Adrian interrupted her thoughts. "Would it really be winning if you bested that Sebastian of yours because of magic?" He mused aloud. The question struck a chord within Cass. Was true victory possible through artificial means? Yet the weight of her desire for vengeance pressed heavily on her heart. She had spent years enduring humiliation at Sebastian's hands, watching him tarnish her reputation and manipulate those around them. Her pride and perhaps her sense of justice demanded retribution. Determined not to back down, Cass argued, "It's not just about beating him. It's about proving I'm capable of standing up for myself. If magic gives me the edge I need, then so be it." Adrian studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Finally he sighed. "Very well," he said. "But know this, magic always comes with a price. Are you prepared to face the consequences?" Cass nodded without hesitation. Whatever the cost, she was willing to pay it. Over the following weeks, Adrian worked with Cass, teaching her how to harness the power he offered. The process was grueling, pushing her beyond her limits both physically and mentally. But Cass persevered, driven by the thought of finally besting Sebastian and reclaiming her dignity. As the day of the hunt approached, she felt a mix of excitement and dread. She knew she was stepping into uncharted territory, but the prospect of victory kept her focused. On the morning of the hunt, the air buzzed with anticipation. Packs from across the region gathered at the edge of the forest, cheering on their respective competitors. Sebastian stood tall and confident among his peers, radiating arrogance. Cass, though not officially participating, lingered nearby, her presence unnoticed by most. When the signal was given, the participants disappeared into the dense woods, leaving behind a trail of eager spectators. For hours, the forest echoed with the sounds of pursuit. Sebastian moved swiftly, his instincts sharp and his confidence unwavering. Meanwhile, Cass remained hidden. Biding her time, using the knowledge Adrian had imparted, she tracked Sebastian's movements carefully, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As dusk fell, Sebastian emerged from the trees, dragging a massive stag behind him. His grin widened as he imagined the accolades awaiting him. Just as he stepped into the clearing where the judges waited, Cass made her move. With a burst of speed enhanced by magic, she intercepted him, snatching the stag from his grasp. Before he could react, she darted away, disappearing into the shadows. Confusion rippled through the crowd as Sebastian shouted in outrage. The judges conferred briefly before declaring Cass the winner, citing the rules that stated whoever brought the largest bounty to the finish line earned the prize. Though technically ineligible due to her age, her unexpected triumph left no room for argument. Sebastian seethed, humiliated in front of the entire community. For the first time, he found himself on the receiving end of ridicule rather than admiration. Cass, however, felt a strange emptiness alongside her satisfaction. While she had succeeded in defeating Sebastian, the victory felt hollow. The price of magic lingered in her mind, whispering promises of future challenges yet to come. Respect. Cass had spent weeks preparing for the hunt in secret, poring over the plans by night and memorizing every detail. She mapped out the forest during the day, shifting into her wolf form to study the terrain, track deer, and identify risky trails where bears might roam. She trained herself to move quickly, quietly, and blend seamlessly with the shadows and leaves. One crisp morning, her breath visible in the cold air, Cassandra encountered a bear from a distance. Her heart raced as she observed its size and strength, committing every detail to memory. Over the following days, she tracked the beast while in human form to avoid leaving her scent, learning its habits and patterns. On the day of the hunt, Cassandra rose before dawn, anticipation tightening her muscles. She entered the woods separately, following the trail she had memorized, diverging from the path taken by Sebastian and the other hunters. Her journey through the underbrush was silent, her heart pounding as she waited for the bear to appear. When it finally emerged, with the sun just beginning to rise over the horizon, the battle began. The fight lasted longer than Cass had anticipated, and exhaustion overwhelmed her. Doubts crept in, perhaps she had been foolish to take on such dangerous prey. Could she truly defeat it? Yet the thought of Sebastian winning drove her forward. She wouldn't let him claim victory. This bear stood between her and her goal. With determination burning brighter than her fatigue, she fought until the bear fell, dragging its massive body into the clearing. Cassandra felt the crowd's reaction ripple through the air. Stunned silence gave way to thunderous applause and cheers. She dropped her trophy at the center of the clearing, standing tall despite her heaving chest and trembling limbs. The elders exchanged shocked glances before the head elder stepped forward. His face bore an expression of reluctant admiration as he lifted the garland meant for Sebastian and placed it around Cassandra's neck. "We crown Cassandra as this year's victor," his voice boomed across the gathering. Cass hadn't expected the uproar her victory would cause, or that she'd become a local legend overnight. Truthfully, she cared little for the accolades. What mattered most was the look of pure shock on Sebastian's face, the only reward she truly sought. Lifting her chin, she met his gaze. In the light, his green eyes were wide with surprise, resentment, and anger. But beneath those emotions lingered something else, something unsettlingly close to respect. As the celebration continued around her, Cassandra allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. This victory wasn't just about proving herself to others, it was about proving something to herself. For years, she had doubted her abilities, overshadowed by those who seemed stronger, faster, and more capable. But now, standing amidst the cheers and applause, she realized she had broken free of those doubts. She had faced her fears, overcome them, and emerged victorious. Yet, even as pride swelled within her, Cassandra couldn't ignore the weight of what lay ahead. Winning the hunt had set her apart, but it also made her a target. Sebastian's glare burned into her, promising future challenges. The elders' surprised expressions hinted at expectations she wasn't sure she wanted to meet. And then there was the lingering question. What did this victory mean for her place among her peers? For now, though, Cassandra chose to savor the moment. She had earned it, after all. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting golden light over the clearing, she turned away from the crowd and looked toward the forest. It was vast and untamed, much like the journey she had embarked upon. Whatever came next, she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer the same person who had entered those woods weeks ago. She had changed, and so had the world around her. Her hands still bore the marks of the battle, her body ached from exertion, but her spirit soared. The hunt had tested her limits, pushed her beyond what she thought possible, and revealed a strength she hadn't known she possessed. As the celebrations carried on behind her, Cassandra walked to the edge of the clearing, her footsteps steady and purposeful. The wilderness called to her. whispering promises of new challenges and adventures. She smiled faintly, feeling the cool breeze against her skin. This was only the beginning. Cass felt a rush of admiration that made her head spin with pride. Her heart pounded wildly against her ribcage, and little did she know, she would grow addicted to this feeling. Unfortunately for her, nothing but Sebastian's admiring gaze could bring it to her. At 13, Cass won her first fight against an older beta wolf from her pack. She was aggressive, a force to be reckoned with, and despite her youth, she was confident she would only grow stronger. She now wore her hair tightly back in a severe braid, one she hated taking down even when showering because it still hurt that her hair hadn't grown back to its full length. Her father had started pitting her and her twin brother Ronan against each other, testing their abilities. Though he hadn't said anything outright, Cass knew he was trying to determine which of them would be best suited to become alpha, a decision he wouldn't make before their racist birthday. But there was no doubt in Cass's mind that she would be the victor. She would accept nothing less. Across the woods where Sebastian's pack resided, it already looked like he would become the next alpha. If Sebastian was destined to lead, then so was Cass. It would crush her to be anything less than him. He'd never admire her again if she wasn't his equal or better in every way. What reason would she have to face him if she wasn't his rival? Though lately, Cass hadn't had much luck defeating him at anything. She may have bested an older male in a fight and often got the upper hand on her brother, but Sebastian was another story entirely. The two of them had taken to sneaking into the woods at night to hunt or fight ever since Cass's triumph 2 years ago. It was just the two of them now. Their competition had outgrown the need to involve others. What used to be closely matched brawls with unclear victories had begun to shift. Cass might have been tall for her age, but she was lean and slim, with baby fat still clinging to her cheeks. Sebastian, on the other hand, was growing into a teenager, taller, broader, his muscles fuller and more defined with each passing day. Cass sometimes felt his newfound strength coursing beneath her fingers when their bodies collided during battles. It was getting easier for him to twist her arms, pen her down, or press her against a tree, his hazel eyes gleaming with satisfaction. She feared that soon he'd grow bored of her when she no longer posed a challenge. Her father always told her, "You're only worth what you can do." So, between hits and taunts, she told Sebastian about her latest victory. He smirked, countering that others were surely letting her win because her skills were lacking and her technique barely passable. "You're the one holding back your punches," Cass shot back, refusing to let him undermine her confidence. But deep down, doubt crept in. Every time Sebastian pinned her, every time his strength overwhelmed hers, she questioned whether she could keep up with him. Still, she refused to give up. For Cass, being strong wasn't just about proving herself to her father or earning respect within her pack, it was about staying worthy of Sebastian's attention. Without that, what purpose did all her efforts serve? She pushed herself harder than ever, training until her muscles screamed and her body ached. Yet no matter how much progress she made, Sebastian seemed to pull farther ahead. His laughter echoed through the trees as they sparred, teasing her about how predictable her moves were becoming. Each jab stung worse than any punch he threw. Cass gritted her teeth and fought harder, determined not to let him see her falter. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, Sebastian finally relented. They sat side by side on the damp forest floor, catching their breath. "You've improved," he admitted reluctantly, his voice softer than usual. Cass glanced at him sharply, surprised by the compliment. "Don't get cocky," she muttered, but a small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. "You'll need more than brute force to beat me," Sebastian added, nudging her shoulder playfully. Cass rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress the flicker of hope igniting inside her. Maybe she wasn't as far behind as she thought. Maybe, just maybe, she could close the gap between them. As the weeks turned into months, Cass poured everything she had into improving. She studied Sebastian's techniques, analyzing his strengths and weaknesses. She practiced new strategies, honing her agility and speed to compensate for her smaller frame. Slowly but surely, she began to hold her own in their sparring sessions. There were moments when she managed to catch him off guard, landing a blow that left him momentarily stunned. Those fleeting victories fueled her determination, driving her to push even harder. Yet, for all her progress, Cass couldn't shake the fear that Sebastian would eventually surpass her completely. The thought haunted her, gnawing at her resolve. She didn't want to imagine a future where she was no longer his rival, no longer someone he admired. To lose that connection, to lose him, felt unbearable. Despite her fears, Cass continued to train, drawing strength from the fire burning within her. She reminded herself why she started this journey. Not just to prove herself to Sebastian, but to prove something to herself. She wanted to show that she was capable, that she deserved to stand beside him not as his inferior, but as his equal, and perhaps someday she would earn not only his admiration but also his respect. Until then, she would keep fighting, keep striving, and refuse to let anyone or anything diminish her worth. Cass retorts because she isn't a fool. She hates him for holding back, hates him for having grown, while she remains stuck at the very early stages of puberty, lean as ever, without even a hint of curves appearing. It's not breasts or hips she craves, they wouldn't do much good in a fight anyway. What she yearns for is the height and strength that should come with age, but instead, the gap between her and Sebastian has become glaringly pronounced. And it infuriates her further when he tries to shield her from it. Cass has never felt smaller or more inconsequential. At least try to hide it better. She sneers before sweeping his legs out from under him with a well-placed kick. He falls hard and she rolls them over, straddling Sebastian and pinning him to the ground, a move she can't quite explain how she managed. Sebastian blinks up at her. Confusion and surprise etched across his features as Cass stares down at him, barely able to believe her luck. Her thighs are tight around his torso, hands gripping his shoulders firmly. A faint blush begins to creep across Sebastian's cheekbones, catching Cass off guard. For a moment, her fingers loosen against the fabric of his shirt. She's distracted by how dark his gaze becomes, dark with something unnameable. It's not entirely unfamiliar. There's an admiration in it, similar to the looks she'd occasionally gotten in the past for her efforts during sparring matches. But this is different. Entirely new. Sebastian holds himself still beneath her, save for the rapid rise and fall of his chest. His mouth hangs slightly open as he breathes heavily. Cass's own mouth feels dry, her throat tight. The change in Sebastian's scent spikes dangerously, thickening the air around them until everything feels oppressively slow and yet, somehow not unpleasant. Without meaning to, Cass sways forward slightly. At the smallest movement, Sebastian flips her over, reversing their positions with ease. Using all of his superior body mass, he pins her to the ground. "Stop moving," he groans against her neck. "You stop moving," Cass replies lamely, her voice coming out whinnier than intended. Then she feels it, the graze of Sebastian's teeth against her neck. Her eyes widen in disbelief, and genuine fear claws at her senses. Grabbing onto his hair, she yanks his head back. "Get off me," she growls. Sebastian complies instantly, pulling away as though burned. "Where are you about to?" Cass starts, unable to finish the question. He couldn't have been about to bite her, could he? 13 years old, and she knows exactly what a bite means, claiming dominance. Submission, one only acceptable if done with mating intentions. The thought makes her head spin, torn between fear, shame, and some strange, inexplicable disappointment. "Of course not," Sebastian protests vehemently, looking horrified at the mere suggestion. Good. Cass has no desire to be mated at 13, least of all to Sebastian. But then his expression softens, guilt flickering in his eyes. "I scared you," he murmurs, his voice quieter now. Cass pushes herself upright, brushing dirt from her clothes. "No, you didn't," she lies, avoiding his gaze. She doesn't want to admit how shaken she feels, not just by the nearby, but by the way her body had reacted to his proximity, his weight pressing her into the earth. It was wrong, all of it. And she tells herself fiercely that she'll never let it happen again. But deep down, buried beneath layers of pride and denial, a part of her wonders if just maybe she wanted it to happen. Not the bite itself, but the closeness, the intensity, the raw emotion that passed between them, like a spark igniting dry tinder. She shakes her head sharply, banishing the thought. Whatever it was, it doesn't matter. She's Cass, and she refuses to be weak. Refuses to let anyone see her falter. As she walks away, leaving Sebastian kneeling on the ground behind her, she resolves to train harder, push herself farther. If she can't close the physical gap between them, she'll widen the emotional one. Because vulnerability is a luxury she can't afford, not now, not ever. Regret burned hot and heavy in Cass's chest. A humiliation that clawed at her insides like an angry beast. She clenched her fists tightly, nails digging into her palms as she snapped. "Shut up!" The tears came unbidden, streaking down her face before she could stop them. With swift determination, she wiped them away, refusing to let anyone see her weakness. In one fluid motion, she got to her feet and ran, leaving behind the weight of judgment pressing down on her shoulders. The next night, Sebastian didn't show up at their usual meeting place. Days turned into weeks, then months, and they barely crossed paths after that. When they did, it was fleeting insults tossed carelessly between them, or half-hearted jabs meant more out of habit than malice. Gone were the heated arguments, the physical clashes that left bruises but also ignited something fierce within her. His indifference gnawed at her, chipping away pieces of herself she hadn't realized he'd claimed. Cass was 15 when she saw him again, not just glimpses from afar, but truly saw him. That, if she were honest, she'd caught sight of him plenty over the last 2 years. Their encounters had been hollow, devoid of substance or connection. But now, standing there, all those dormant feelings roared back to life with startling clarity. It unnerved her how much his absence had consumed her thoughts, how vividly he haunted her dreams. Dreams became her prison during those lonely nights. Visions of Sebastian invaded her sleep, each one more intense than the last. They fought under moonlit skies, tangled together amidst trees whose branches clawed at the heavens. And every time, she emerged victorious, earning that flicker of admiration in his gaze once more. Then came the bite, the sharp sting of teeth sinking into the tender flesh of her neck. It always ended the same way, her waking gasping for air, heart pounding wildly against her ribs. By day, fragments of those dreams lingered, blurring the line between memory and imagination. Sometimes, she swore she felt phantom pressure against her skin, his teeth grazing her pulse. It drove her mad. This relentless loop of longing and shame. She wanted nothing more than to banish these visions, to rid herself of their grip entirely. Desperation led her to places she never thought she'd go, to Adrian's shop, where magic whispered promises of relief. "Could you take my dreams away?" she asked abruptly, voice trembling despite her effort to sound resolute. Adrian raised an eyebrow, bemused by the request. He glanced at Iris, who stood nearby, silently observing the exchange. "Such dramatics," he murmured, though not unkindly. To Iris he remarked later, "Teenagers are so predictable." But Cass tossed her arms defiantly, chin tilted upward in defiance. "I'm serious." Adrian chuckled softly, leaning back against the counter. Dreams often reflect unconscious feelings. The best way to be rid of them is to confront what haunts you. Her jaw tightened. Confrontation wasn't something she relished, not when it involved Sebastian. Still, his words lingered long after she left the shop, echoing in her mind like a challenge she couldn't ignore. Iris watched her leave, curiosity piqued. Turning to Adrian, she said, "She dreams about him, doesn't she?" "Oh, undoubtedly," he replied, swirling a cup of tea absently. "And it terrifies her." For Cass, the idea of facing Sebastian filled her with dread. There was another emotion simmering beneath the surface, an ache she couldn't name, a pull she didn't fully understand. Her father's death still loomed large in her memories, casting shadows over everything she did. Dreams of him walking through the door alive plagued her nights, leaving her hollow upon waking. Sharing even part of that pain with Iris had been unintentional, yet somehow cathartic. What struck her most, however, was Iris's admission about dreaming of her own father. Something about the raw honesty in those words resonated deeply with Cass. It made her realize how desperately she needed closure, not just with her father, but with Sebastian too. That realization terrified her almost as much as the dreams themselves, so she avoided him. Avoidance felt safer, easier. Yet no matter how far she ran, the image of his smirking face followed her everywhere. Haunted by memories of near misses and stolen glances, Cass wrestled with conflicting desires, to flee or to fight, to forget or to face. Each option carried its own kind of risk, its own potential for destruction. And so she remained stuck, caught between fear and fury, unable or unwilling to choose either path just yet. The gathering stretches late into the night, and Cass knows full well this isn't just some casual meetup, it's bound to spiral into a full-blown party. She doesn't go out much, her time is consumed by training, accompanying her father to meetings, negotiations, and planning sessions tied to pack duties. What little remains is dedicated to her education, which she receives at home like most teens in the pack. Her brother Ronan is similarly reserved when it comes to socializing, but tonight, he's been invited by Kaylee, a friend from an allied pack that settled a couple of hours away. For Ronan, who's utterly smitten with Kaylee, there was no way he'd miss this chance to see her without adult supervision hovering over them. Cass remembers his words vividly. "I'm telling you. Kaylee's my mate." She'd rolled her eyes then, uninterested in the drama surrounding mates and all the complications they bring, especially at their age. In her opinion, finding a mate seemed more about securing strategic alliances for the pack than anything else. Their father had made it abundantly clear he expected nothing less than matches that would benefit their family, particularly since Ronan was destined to become alpha one day. To Cass, Kaylee didn't seem like someone who aligned with their father's business objectives, but Ronan's hopeful expression and infectious enthusiasm roped her in anyway. Alongside a few friends from the pack, Cass agreed to tag along for moral support. Late into the evening, 6 teenagers slipped out of their beds unnoticed and drove off toward the lake, where the gathering was being held. None of them anticipated that Kelly's pack would have other guests' friends from Sebastian's pack, whom they knew well enough to feel comfortable around. And then there's Sebastian himself, taller and broader than ever before now that he's nearly 18. If the attention he's getting from various girls is any indication, he's apparently attractive too. But Cass can't quite figure out why everyone seems so enamored with him. Sure, his hazel eyes shift to a warm green depending on the light, but she's seen prettier ones elsewhere. He's built like most young men his age, strong and athletic, but hardly extraordinary. His brown hair is as messy as it always was, falling across his forehead in disarray. Maybe it's his smile, the lopsided grin he flashes at people he likes. It carries a hint of mischief, though not when directed at Cass. Instead, his smiles toward her come off as aggravating rather than charming. Perhaps other girls interpret those grins differently, as flirtations or hints of something deeper, but the thought makes Cass frown. Unacceptable, she decides, pushing the idea aside immediately. Sebastian has freckles. Jess, one of Cass's close friends, points out when Cass shares her thoughts aloud. "I hadn't even noticed," Cass replies dryly, rolling her eyes. How could anyone not notice? Most of his freckles are clustered on the bridge of his nose, standing out faintly against his skin. She watches as he moves through the crowd, weaving between groups with ease, heading toward a cooler to grab himself a beer. The scene unfolds around her, lively and chaotic, yet Cass feels detached, observing everything from the edges. The music pulses loudly, laughter echoes through the air, and the scent of food mingles with the crispness of the night. People mill about, chatting animatedly or dancing under strings of colorful lights strung between trees. Despite the vibrant atmosphere, Cass keeps to herself, leaning casually against a tree trunk while keeping half an eye on Ronan. Her brother is completely absorbed in Kaylee's presence, his face glowing with adoration every time she speaks. Cass shakes her head slightly, bemused by how quickly he's fallen under her spell. Meanwhile, Sebastian seems to be thriving in the spotlight, surrounded by admirers eager to catch his attention. Some laugh at his jokes, others lean in closer to hear what he's saying, and a few openly bat their eyelashes in his direction. Cass feels a flicker of irritation rise within her, though she can't pinpoint why. Maybe it's because he looks so comfortable in the center of it all, basking in the admiration like it's his birthright. Or maybe it's the fact that he hasn't spared her a second glance since arriving, despite knowing her for years. Not that she cares, of course. Her gaze drifts back to him as he takes a sip from his beer bottle, his movements relaxed and unhurried. There's something infuriatingly confident about the way he carries himself, as if he owns the space he occupies. Cass crosses her arms over her chest, narrowing her eyes slightly. Whatever charm he possesses, it certainly doesn't work on her. At least, that's what she tells herself. Jess nudges her gently, pulling her from her thoughts. "You're staring again," she teases, her tone light but teasing nonetheless. "I'm not," Cass retorts quickly, glancing away. "Just..." "Aha," Jess replies, clearly unconvinced. "If you say so." Cass ignores her, focusing instead on scanning the area for Ronan. Sure enough, he's still engrossed in conversation with Kaylee, oblivious to everything else. A small part of her worries about him, about how easily he's letting himself get swept up in emotions that might not end well, but she pushes the concern aside. Tonight isn't about worrying, it's supposed to be about having fun, even if fun isn't exactly her strong suit. As the hours pass, the energy of the gathering intensifies. More people arrive, bringing with them fresh stories, louder music, and a palpable sense of excitement. Cass finds herself caught between wanting to retreat further into the shadows and reluctantly acknowledging the pull of the festivities. Eventually, curiosity wins out, and she steps closer to the heart of the celebration, blending into the throng of bodies moving rhythmically to the beat. It's there, amidst the chaos, that Sebastian finally approaches her. Up close, she notices details she hadn't before: the faint stubble along his jawline, the way his shirt clings loosely to his frame, the slight dimple that appears when he smiles. Before she can stop herself, she meets his gaze, and for a moment, the world seems to quiet around them. "You've been avoiding me," he says, his voice low but amused. "I haven't," she counters automatically, though her cheeks betray her with a faint flush. "Could fooled me," he replies, leaning casually against the same tree she's been using as a barrier all night. For once, Cass doesn't have a sharp comeback ready. Instead, she studies him silently, trying to decipher the look in his eyes. Whatever it is, it leaves her feeling unsettled and strangely intrigued. The comment made her laugh, but it wasn't about his looks. If people stared, it was because of the confidence he radiated, the way he carried himself with an effortless authority that commanded respect. His presence exuded a quiet dominance, one everyone around the lake instinctively recognized. That night, Cass dreamed she was back by the lake, but this time it was her who drew everyone's attention. She stood tall, head held high, basking in their admiration. In her dream, she embodied dominance, a future alpha in her own right. Sebastian was among the crowd, subjected to her authority like everyone else. But it was his submission that made her wolf swell with pride, awakening her with a surge of power and liberation. She felt in control, invigorated, and clear on what needed to be done. As a child, she had matched Sebastian's strategic mind. Now, as a teen, she would match his social prowess. Perhaps then he'd stop treating her like a youngling and see her for the rival she truly was, a rival he'd never dare challenge again. Cass was mere weeks away from turning 16 when she decided to enact her plan. It came after witnessing Sebastian charm an entire gathering around a campfire on the lake's shore. The night of her opportunity wasn't another lakeside gathering, it was a party at a club. Getting in posed no issue for Cass. Though she was only 15, she looked older than her years. Tall and lean with long, shapely legs, she could easily pass for a young adult with just a touch of makeup. Her features were striking rather than conventionally soft or delicate, yet they suited her well: full lips, dark gray eyes, and a figure that often drew lingering glances from members of her pack. Cass entered the club feeling confident, her satisfaction growing as she noticed the subtle stares following her every move. On the dance floor, she moved with purpose, drawing even more attention. Her brother watched uncomfortably, his unease evident, but she brushed it off. His discomfort was his burden, not hers. As she danced between two boys slightly older than herself, she felt nothing but ease. They might have been stronger physically, but Cass knew she could hold her own against them if need be. Then her gaze locked onto Sebastian across the room. He stood at the bar, drink in hand, his eyes widening fractionally before his expression hardened into a grim line. A flicker of irritation crossed his face, and his body tensed almost imperceptibly, as though he meant to approach her. Cass's heartbeat quickened in anticipation. But then, one of Sebastian's friends, a wolf from Kay's pack whom Cass vaguely recognized, lightly punched his shoulder, diverting his attention. Without another glance in her direction, Sebastian turned and followed his friend to join a group seated in a booth. Cass felt her stomach drop, humiliation burning her cheeks. That was it. Barely a glance tinged with mild irritation instead of the fiery anger she had grown accustomed to over the years. This wouldn't do, not in a million years. If Sebastian thought he could dismiss her so easily, he was sorely mistaken. Determined, Cass pushed through the crowd toward the booth where Sebastian sat. She didn't care about the curious glances or the whispers trailing behind her. All that mattered was proving herself to him, to her pack, and most importantly to herself. When she reached the table, she planted herself firmly in front of Sebastian, meeting his cool gaze with unwavering determination. "You won't ignore me," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. For a moment, silence fell over the group as all eyes turned to her. Even Sebastian seemed taken aback, his usual composure faltering ever so slightly. "Cassandra," he began, his tone measured but laced with warning. "No," she cut him off, refusing to let him regain control of the situation. "I'm done being treated like I don't matter. Like I'm still some little pup you can push aside whenever it suits you." Her words hung in the air, bold and unyielding. Around them, the noise of the club faded into the background as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Sebastian studied her for a long moment, his sharp gaze assessing, calculating. Finally, a faint smirk tugged at the corner of his mouth. "All right then," he said, leaning back in his seat. "Let's see what you've got." It wasn't quite the acknowledgement Cass had hoped for, but it was something a crack in the wall he had built around himself. And for now, that was enough. She straightened her posture, letting her wolf rise closer to the surface, its strength bolstering her resolve. Whatever games Sebastian wanted to play, she was ready. This was her moment, and she wasn't going to waste it. By the end of the night, Cass had managed to weave herself into conversations, earning nods of approval and even a few compliments from others in the group. Sebastian remained aloof, but there was a new edge to his demeanor, a flicker of interest she hadn't seen before. As the hours passed and the party wound down, Cass found herself standing near the exit, catching her breath after another round of dancing. Sebastian approached her, his movements deliberate and unhurried. "You're persistent," he remarked, his tone neutral but his eyes betraying a hint of grudging respect. "I told you," she replied, tilting her chin up defiantly. "I'm not the same person I used to be." He regarded her for a moment longer before nodding slowly. "Maybe not, but we'll see how far you can take it." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Cass to process the weight of his words. Far from discouraging her, they fueled her determination even further. She wasn't just competing for validation anymore. She was fighting for recognition, for proof that she belonged among the strongest, the fiercest, the leaders of her pack. And she wouldn't stop until she earned it. Cass watched him from a distance, her sharp eyes catching every detail. He seemed so sure of himself now, stronger than her and her pack combined. Their old rivalry was nothing but a distant memory to him, something he didn't even acknowledge anymore. She clenched her jaw slightly before stepping in closer, refusing to let him forget who she was or what they once were to each other. She observed him discreetly as he laughed with someone else, a wolf from Kale's pack, no less. The stranger had somehow stolen his attention away, and the two appeared comfortable together like old friends. Cass felt an unfamiliar twinge of irritation at how easily this interloper fit into Sebastian's world. Well, if that's how it's going to be. The moment Sebastian's companion wandered off toward the bar, Cass made her move. With casual grace, she slid into place beside her target, positioning herself just close enough to catch his notice without seeming too eager. It didn't take long for him to register her presence, his senses spiked with interest almost immediately. Cass fought the urge to roll her eyes. "Hey," he said, his voice carrying a hint of uncertainty. "I've seen you before, I think." "I'm Peter." Cass tilted her head slightly, studying him. Peter. This was the guy Sebastian found so fascinating. Honestly, he wasn't much to look at, awkward and clumsy with his words. Still, she plastered on a coy smile. "I don't think so. I'd remember," she replied, giving him a wink that sent a wave of desire rippling through his scent. Disgusting, yet useful. Peter fumbled over his next words, clearly flustered. Can I get you a beer?" "No thanks," Cass answered smoothly, letting her lips curve into a teasing grin. "Maybe a cocktail." Peter shook his head, his gaze locked onto her mouth. "A glass of wine." Cass leaned in, brushing her hair back as she brought her lips near his ear. Her voice dropped low, sultry. "How about we go somewhere quiet instead?" His breath hitched audibly, and Cass resisted the urge to smirk. Men were always so predictable. Without waiting for a response, she guided them toward a shadowy corner, angling their bodies carefully so they remained within Sebastian's line of sight. Sure enough, it only took seconds for her plan to work. The air around them thickened with Sebastian's unmistakable scent, spicy, sharp, and laced with fury. Before she could react further, Strong hands yanked Peter away from her. Sebastian loomed over them, his expression twisted with rage. His friend stumbled backward, barely catching himself against a nearby pillar. "What the hell, man?" Peter stammered, shock written across his face. Sebastian ignored him, his focus entirely on Cass. "Get off her," he snarled, his voice cutting through the noise of the crowded room. Cass blinked innocently, feigning surprise. "Oh, come on, Sebastian. Don't tell me you're jealous." "This isn't a game," he growled, stepping closer until he towered over her. "She's 16, for God's sake." "You think it's okay to take advantage of a minor?" Cass rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. "Relax. I didn't know she was 16. Peter winced, glancing between them nervously. "I mean, she doesn't look like—" He cut himself off, waving a hand vaguely in Cass's direction, but it was too late. Sebastian's anger surged again, practically choking the air around them. Cass felt it too, heavy and suffocating, but she refused to back down. Instead, she raised an eyebrow, her tone dripping with mockery. "You're really going to act like some knight in shining armor now? Over him." She gestured toward Peter, who looked increasingly uncomfortable under Sebastian's glare. "Please. I've handled worse than you both combined." Sebastian's jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. For a moment, it seemed like he might actually throw a punch. But then, just as quickly as it had flared, his anger shifted. His shoulders relaxed slightly, though his eyes still burned with intensity. "You're playing a dangerous game, Cass," he said quietly, his voice low and measured. "And I won't let you drag innocent people into your mess." Her lips curled into a bitter smile. "Innocent. Because everyone here is such a saint." For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The tension between them crackled, electric and undeniable. Finally, Sebastian turned on his heel, grabbing Peter by the arm and dragging him away. Cass watched them leave, her smirk fading as the reality of the situation settled over her. She hadn't expected him to intervene, not like that. Not with such raw possessiveness. It shouldn't have mattered, not after everything they'd been through, but it did. And she hated herself for it. Letting out a slow breath, Cass straightened her posture and smoothed her hair. Whatever games she was playing, whatever lines she crossed, one thing remained clear: Sebastian hadn't forgotten her. Not completely. And maybe, just maybe, that gave her the edge she needed. Peter instinctively knows better than to provoke stronger, more dominant wolves. It's a survival instinct practically etched into their DNA. And being no match for Sebastian, Peter visibly shrinks under his rival's furious stance. "Sorry, Cass," he mutters, hoping this will appease Sebastian somewhat. It does not. "Don't you dare look at her," Sebastian growls, lunging toward Peter only to be abruptly yanked back by the arm. "Enough," Cass tells him, lacing her words with enough command to secure his attention. "I wanted him to kiss me." Sebastian's jaw clenches in barely contained aggression, though this time it is focused solely on Cass. For the first time in 3 years, his gaze darkens, brooding and intense. His posture radiates hostility, and his scent-sharp, earthy Premel goes straight to Cass's head. She realizes, slightly startled by the thought, that she's missed this. "Cass," he mutters, breathing deeply through his nose as if trying to regain control. Sebastian shakes with restrained anger, their faces inches apart, his eyes glowing a fierce gold. Cass half considers warning him about it. A human could easily notice, but she's too consumed by the satisfaction of finally being the focus of his hatred again. "He wanted more than to kiss you," Sebastian mutters, his fingers tightening around Cass's arm in a grip that feels far too possessive. Cass's wolf preens with smug satisfaction. "I'd be happy to let him," she says, smiling deliberately crude. Sebastian's grip tightens further, bordering on painful. And for a brief moment every instinct in Cass's body screams at her, not out of fear, but something deeper, something primal she can't quite grasp. His eyes drop to her bare neck with an intensity that makes her breath catch. The absurd thought that he might bite her flashes through her mind, freezing her lungs mid-breath. Then just as suddenly Sebastian releases her and storms off. Cass stands there, breathless and dumbfounded. She's 16. But she feels 8 again, like the day he'd stuck gum in her hair. Mortified, she realizes tears are threatening to spill. But before she can process anything, he turns back, strides toward her and barks or place. Tomorrow night, triumph washes over Cass. Cassandra is 17 when her meetings with Sebastian in the woods take a different turn. They barely speak before they come to blows. That night, Cass is quick to taunt her rival into throwing the first punch. He's livid with her. She can tell because she's succeeded in diverting yet another one of his friends' attention. She wants him to know she could steal anyone's focus from him if she so desired. People only look at Sebastian because she allows it. Should she wish, she could take that away from him in an instant. Sebastian is strong, Cass is fast. Both are skilled fighters who exploit each other's weaknesses with instinctual precision honed from years of observation and combat. She throws a punch, he parries. He goes for a kick, and she spins them into a safer position. Their movements are fluid, almost choreographed, yet brimming with raw aggression. Each strike carries weight, anger, frustration, something neither dares to name. They fight until sweat slicks their skin and their breaths come in ragged gasps. Finally, Sebastian pins her against a tree, his hands gripping her wrists above her head. His chest heaves, pressing flush against hers, and his golden eyes burn into hers. There's a storm raging behind those irises, one Cass recognizes all too well because it mirrors her own turmoil. "You think you're clever," he snarls, voice low and dangerous. "But you're playing with fire." "And you think I care," she retorts, arching an eyebrow despite her compromised position. Her heartbeat thunders in her ears, loud enough to drown out the forest around them. For a moment, neither moves. The tension between them shifts, morphs into something electric, undeniable. Then, with a growl, Sebastian releases her and steps back, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "This changes nothing," he says, voice rough, though whether he's convincing her or himself remains unclear. "It changes everything," Cass replies softly, watching as he disappears into the shadows, leaving her alone beneath the moonlight. Weeks pass, and their encounters become a strange dance of dominance and desire. Neither acknowledges what simmers beneath the surface, yet both feel it acutely. One evening, as they face off once more, Cass decides to push him further. She lets her guard down deliberately, allowing him to land a blow that sends her sprawling to the ground. When she looks up at him, there's no malice in her expression, only challenge. "Is that all you've got?" she taunts, wiping blood from the corner of her mouth. Sebastian hesitates, his usual composure cracking. Without warning, he drops to his knees beside her, his hands framing her face. His touch is gentle despite the ferocity still coursing through him. "Why do you do this?" he demands, his voice trembling with emotion. "Why do you make me lose control?" Cass stares at him, her heart pounding wildly. For the first time, she sees vulnerability in his eyes, a crack in the armor he's worn for so long. It unnerves her, stirs something deep within her chest. "Maybe I want you to lose control," she whispers, her voice barely audible. The air between them thickens, charged with unspoken words and suppressed longing. Slow once more, Sebastian leans closer, his lips hovering just above hers. Cass closes her eyes, anticipation coiling in her stomach. But instead of kissing her, he presses his forehead to hers, exhaling sharply. "We shouldn't," he murmurs, though his grip on her doesn't loosen. "Why not?" she challenged, opening her eyes to meet his. "Because if we start," he trails off, swallowing hard. "There'll be no going back." Her pulse quickens at the implication. "Maybe I don't want to go back." Sebastian pulls away abruptly, standing and turning his back to her. "You don't know what you're saying." "Yes, I do," she insists, rising to her feet. "I know exactly what I'm saying." He glances over his shoulder, his expression torn. "Then prove it. Meet me here tomorrow." "Alone." Before she can respond, he's gone, vanishing into the darkness. Cass remains rooted to the spot, her mind racing. Whatever line they've been towing, they're about to cross it, and she isn't sure she'll survive the fallout. Their fight is relentless, each blow and parry seamlessly blending into the next. It feels endless, their breaths mingling in jagged gasps that echo through the dense woods. Cass's back throbs from repeatedly slamming against tree trunks, her blood rushing hot beneath her skin. "I think we're finished here," Sebastian says, his voice cutting through the tension sooner than she expected. There's a wariness in his eyes, a resignation that twists something deep within Cass. Finished. The word ignites a fire inside her. She growls low in her throat, lashing out with a swift kick aimed at his leg, but he dodges it effortlessly. The thought of them being finished sends rage surging through her veins, blinding her momentarily. How dare he still treat her like some inexperienced youngling to coddle? She's grown now, every bit his equal. Blow for blow, strike for strike. They match each other perfectly. He doesn't need to hold back, she knows he can see that. Why won't he acknowledge it? With an anguished scream, she throws herself at him, tackling him to the ground. They grapple briefly before their eyes lock, and then she isn't sure how it starts. Only that suddenly her fingers are tangled in his short hair, pulling him closer as their lips crash together. This kiss is nothing like any she's ever known. It's raw, it's forceful, almost angry. It feels like reclaiming not just territory or dominance but something deeper, primal. Neither pulls away. Hesitation abandoned the moment their mouths met. Sebastian's teeth nip sharply at her lower lip, growing more insistent as if realizing she matches his intensity without faltering. His hands grip her fiercely, bruising in their desperation, as though trying to imprint himself on her. If he isn't her first, then he'll damn well be her best, and right now, Cass believes him entirely. Even though pride keeps her silent about it, her legs wrap around his waist, drawing him closer still, craving more of whatever this is between them. He breaks the kiss only to trail searing kisses down her neck, his touch branding her. His scent envelopes her musky, wild, intoxicating, and she recognizes it now for what it truly is: desire. Thick, syrupy, all-consuming. Every moan torn from her lips spurs him on further, until they're both lost in the rhythm of their bodies moving together. When his gaze meets hers again, searching for permission, she gives it freely, encouraging him with whispered words and eager hands. Clothes come off quickly after that, discarded without ceremony. Pain flashes briefly when they finally join, but it's fleeting, overshadowed by the overwhelming connection between them. She clings to him, urging him onward, reveling in the sounds he makes as much as the sensations coursing through her own body. For those moments, there's nothing else in the world except the two of them, bound together in ways neither fully understands yet. Later, alone in her room under the heavy weight of her blankets, regret begins to creep in. What had they done? This was something meant for mates, or at least people who shared more than just rivalry and frustration. Guilt tightens her throat as she replays the events over and over in her mind. Yet despite the shame gnawing at her, one truth remains undeniable. No matter how wrong it might have been, it felt achingly, undeniably right. Days pass, and the memory lingers like smoke clinging to her thoughts. Training sessions become awkward silences punctuated by stolen glances. Neither mentions what happened, but the air between them crackles with unspoken tension. Cass tries to focus on her duties, throwing herself into patrols and sparring matches with anyone willing to take her on. Anything to distract herself from the ache in her chest whenever Sebastian walks by. But avoidance proves futile. One evening, while walking along the edge of the forest, she hears his voice behind her. Cass. Just her name spoken softly, yet it stops her dead in her tracks. She turns slowly, heart pounding, bracing herself for whatever comes next. "We can't keep pretending it didn't happen," he says, stepping closer. His expression is guarded, but there's vulnerability in his tone that catches her off guard. "I don't know what you want me to say," she mutters, looking away. The moonlight filters through the trees, casting dappled shadows across his face. She hates how handsome he looks, how easily he unravels her defenses. "I want you to admit it wasn't just me," he replies, his voice firm but tinged with something softer. That night it wasn't one-sided. Her cheeks burn, but she forces herself to meet his gaze. "So what if it wasn't? What does that change?" "Everything," he says simply, closing the distance between them. His hand brushes hers, tentative but enough to send sparks shooting up her arm. "You feel it too, don't you? That pull." Demile sits heavy on her tongue, but she swallows it down. Lying would only make things worse. Instead, she nods once, barely perceptible, but it's enough for him. A small smile tugs at the corner of his mouth, and for the first time in days the tension eases slightly. "This doesn't mean I trust you," she says quickly, crossing her arms defensively, "and it definitely doesn't mean I forgive you." "I'm not asking for either," he responds. "Not yet, anyway. But maybe we could figure this out. Together." The idea terrifies her almost as much as it intrigues her. Trust has never come easily to Cass, especially not with someone like Sebastian. Yet, standing there under the watchful gaze of the moon, she finds herself considering it not because she wants to, but because deep down, she knows he's right. Whatever this thing between them is, it's bigger than both of them, and ignoring it won't make it disappear. For better or worse, they're tied together now. Whether by choice or circumstance remains to be seen. Natural enemies. Will Sebastian even respect her as a rival now that he's had her like that? Will he look at her differently? Will he even come back to meet with her tomorrow? To fight her as he should. He does come back, and they do fight, though it doesn't last very long, not with their bodies pressed so closely together. Her scent still present on Sebastian's skin, mingling with his, not with the way his eyes flutter shut for a moment. Lips parting when he detects his own imprint onto Cass, his hands on her no less gripping, strained with a different sort of fight one Cass is unequipped to rebuke, unwilling even. If Sebastian is going to keep looking at her like he'll never look at anything else ever again. The following night, their pretense of a fight is even shorter, and the one after that, they don't even pretend. Their lips collide instantly into a demanding kiss, their hands roaming over each other's bodies, hurried and demanding. The simplest touch causes Cass to shiver. There's no pain anymore. Only pleasure she hadn't thought could exist, and new emotions just as intense and all-consuming as anger, though she doesn't know how to name them. Every night, Cass comes back home, telling herself this was the last time, that they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. But the following day, as soon as the sun sets, she finds herself growing restless, running away to the woods to Sebastian II. She's certain no one will notice, eager for his hands to be on her again. To feel his grip turn punishing when their lips meet again after being apart for the day. She thinks perhaps after some time, the novelty of this experience will fade, and with it any desire on her part for it to continue. She doesn't dare think of how it would make her feel should it dull on Sebastian's end. She will not think of that. For once it does, what will she become? Adrian isn't in the shop the next time Cass comes to visit. She's alone, going through books distractedly when she enters, eyes wild with something unspoken. When will he be back? She mutters, closing her eyes in resignation when I tell her he's gone off somewhere for God knows how long. I need him to free me of this insanity. She seems distressed, fevered almost, as she begins to pace around the shop like a beast trapped in a cage. What did you want him to do exactly? I ask, hoping to deter, just as I've seen Adrian manage to accomplish a couple of times before now. I want to be rid of my... Cass can't bring herself to say the words and falls quiet, heat grazing her features. Never mind, she says at last. Cass's isnatsity when fights between members of her pack and Sebastian escalate. Later, she cannot even remember what started it. She'd been with her brother and other pack mates, hanging out in a bar. One of them, a male named Finn whom she grew up with and is close to, teases her about something, putting an arm around her shoulders, a familiar gesture she's used to and thinks nothing of. In fact, perhaps he hadn't even done it. She thinks to brush it off until she senses him. Sebastian, watching from across the room, his jaw tightens, nostrils flaring slightly as if catching Finn's scent on her, or maybe it's hers mixed with his own lingering traces. Whatever it is ignites something primal within him, something neither logic nor reason can temper. Before she knows it, Sebastian strides toward them, posture rigid, movements predatory. Her heart pounds wildly against her chest, torn between apprehension and anticipation. Get your hands off her, he growls low enough for only those nearby to hear, yet loud enough to carry an undeniable threat. Finn stiffens beside her but doesn't move immediately, confusion flickering across his face before recognition dawns. Recognition and challenge. Who's gonna make me? Finn retorts, tone teasing but edged with steel. Around them, the air thick, charged with tension as others begin to take notice. Cass feels the weight of every gaze, every whispered murmur rippling through the crowd. This wasn't supposed to happen here, not tonight, not like this. Yet there's no stopping it now. Instinct takes over. In one swift motion, Sebastian grabs Finn by the collar, yanking him forward. A collective gasp ripples through the room as chairs scrape against the floor, people scrambling out of the way. Before fists fly, Cass steps between them, placing both hands firmly against Sebastian's chest. His muscles are taut beneath her palms, vibrating with barely contained fury. She meets his gaze head-on, amber meeting stormy gray, daring him to push past her. For a moment, neither moves, the world narrowing down to just the two of them locked in silent battle. Stop, she demands, voice steady despite the turmoil swirling inside her. Not here. Not now. It's unclear whether she's pleading or commanding, but it works. Slowly, reluctantly, Sebastian releases Finn, who stumbles back, glaring daggers but wisely choosing not to escalate further. The rest of the pack watches silently, tension simmering beneath the surface. Cass exhales sharply. Turning to face Sebastian fully, her expression softens though her stance remains firm. "You need to leave," she tells him quietly, knowing full well the consequences of sending him away. But staying would only make things worse for everyone involved. Without another word, Sebastian turns and walks out, leaving behind a trail of unresolved tension and unanswered questions. As the door slams shut behind him, Cass feels the weight of countless eyes boring into her back. She swallows hard, forcing herself to remain composed. Finn breaks the silence first, clapping a hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" he asks, concern etched into his features. She nods, though the truth is far more complicated. She's anything but okay. Because deep down, she knows this isn't over, not by a long shot. And as much as she tries to convince herself otherwise, part of her doesn't want it to be. Cass found herself lying in her bed, though she wasn't sure if it had been yesterday or the day before. In the back of her mind, she knew Sebastian was somewhere nearby in the bar, perhaps. She hadn't seen him directly but recognized his scent lingering faintly in the air. A few wolves from his pack were scattered around the place, hoarding the pool table and playing for hours on end. Finn complained to Ronan about their presence, earning only a good-natured shrug in response. Unlike Cass, her brother wasn't one for conflict. "We could ask them to join the game," Ronan suggested casually, glancing at Cass with purpose. His tone carried an unspoken plea. "Aren't we past all this?" Reluctantly, Finn rose to his feet, briefly squeezing Cass's shoulder as he passed by. She exchanged a joke or two with the others still seated at their table, taking slow sips of her beer while trying not to dwell on anything or anyone else. But then, a loud crashing noise shattered the relative calm, drawing everyone's attention toward the back of the bar. There stood Finn, gripping Sebastian's shirt tightly as he backed him up against the wall. The alpha's scent radiated fury and menace, filling the room like a storm cloud. Cass shot to her feet, positioning herself between the two men almost instinctively. "What are you doing?" she barked at Finn, her voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. "He smells like you." Finn spat accusingly, turning his fiery gaze onto her. Horror washed over Cass as her eyes flicked briefly to Sebastian. He looked ready to speak, but she cut him off before he could utter a word. "It's nothing," she said quickly, avoiding his gaze altogether. "We met briefly behind the bar last night. Had a little squabble, that's all." Her words were hollow even to her own ears. Everyone present knew that wasn't true. If Sebastian smelled like her, it wasn't because of some trivial argument. It was because they'd been together the night before, and every night leading up to it. Ronan frowned deeply, his usual laid-back demeanor replaced by something far more aggressive. Cass was taken aback. Ronan avoided conflict whenever possible. Yet here he was bristling with barely contained rage. His protectiveness surged forward, overriding everything else. "You attacked her," he hissed at Sebastian, venom dripping from each syllable. "Are you insane? You're an alpha now, you should have known better." "No, I didn't attack her," Cass interjected desperately, though Ronan ignored her completely, shoving Sebastian back when the latter attempted to explain himself. Sebastian shot her an annoyed glance, clearly frustrated at being silenced. "We didn't fight," he started again, his voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around them. Cass' heart froze mid-beat. What would happen if he told the truth, if he revealed exactly what they'd been doing instead? Panic clawed at her chest, and without thinking, she blurted out, "Yes, we did." The lie hung heavy in the air, igniting Ronan's temper further. With a roar of pure rage, he lunged at Sebastian, only to be intercepted by one of the other wolves who tackled him to the ground. Even Cass found herself forced into action when one of Sebastian's companions swung at her. She parried the blow deftly, stepping back just in time to avoid escalating things further. That's when she noticed the humans wide-eyed and staring, their shocked expressions making the situation infinitely worse. Sebastian seemed to realize it too. "Enough," he commanded sharply, his voice cutting through the commotion like a blade. Every member of his pack froze instantly, obeying their alpha's order. To Cass's dismay, several members of her own group hesitated before reluctantly following suit. Yet Sebastian's authority wasn't enough to deter Ronan entirely. "Stay the hell away from my sister," Ronan growled, dragging Cass after him as he stormed toward the exit. She glanced back once, hoping to catch Sebastian's eye. But he deliberately avoided her gaze, leaving her stomach churning with guilt and unease. Outside, the cool night air hit her face, offering little relief from the turmoil brewing inside her. Ronan released her arm abruptly, spinning to face her with fire still blazing in his eyes. "What were you thinking?" he demanded, his voice trembling with anger and betrayal. "Do you have any idea how dangerous he is?" "I can take care of myself," Cass shot back, though her voice lacked conviction. "That's not the point," Ronan snapped. "You're my sister, I'm supposed to protect you. And him, he's trouble, Cass. Can't you see that?" She clenched her fists tightly, fighting the urge to scream. Trouble wasn't exactly the right word for Sebastian. Complicated maybe, dangerous, probably. But there was so much more beneath the surface, things Ronan would never understand. Things even she struggled to make sense of. "I'm not a child anymore, Ronan," she said finally, her voice quieter but no less resolute. "I don't need you hovering over me like I'm made of glass." For a moment, he just stared at her, his jaw working silently as if searching for the right words. When none came, he exhaled sharply and turned away, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Just be careful, okay?" he muttered, his tone softening slightly. "I don't trust him." With that, he walked off, leaving Cass alone under the pale glow of the streetlights. She watched him disappear into the distance, her chest tight with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to chase after him, to reassure him that everything would be fine even if she couldn't quite convince herself of that. Another part wanted to run straight back to the bar, to confront Sebastian and demand answers he probably wouldn't give. Instead, she stood there, rooted to the spot, letting the weight of everything settle heavily on her shoulders. The night stretched endlessly ahead of her, full of unanswered questions and tangled loyalties. And somewhere within the shadows, Sebastian waited, patient, infuriating, and impossible to ignore. Her heart sinks as they meet later that night. "What were you thinking?" he exclaims, pacing in front of her. "Telling your pack we'd gotten into a fight. Seriously, Cass, what else was I supposed to say? Finn smelled me on you." What if he'd realized what then? Sebastian sneers, turning away sharply. "It wouldn't have been worse than them thinking an alpha had attacked you alone," she counters, heat burning her cheeks. Cass stomps her foot on the ground, feeling utterly powerless. "And why not? I could take you, you know I could." Sebastian's eyes are furious when they settle on her. "It doesn't matter," he snaps back. "I'm the leader now. I can't just be picking fights with random wolves, especially not ones from a pack that doesn't get along with mine." "I'm not a random wolf," Cass screeches, pushing his shoulders aggressively. "You know what I mean," Sebastian retorts with a grimace. "Do I, Cass?" His voice softens slightly, unable to hold back the hurt tempering her words. Sebastian's gaze softens briefly before he purses his lips in resolve. "You're the one who panicked at the idea of everyone finding out about us, not me." He shrugs helplessly. "What am I supposed to think? Especially when you let all these other wolves touch you right in front of me." "There is no us. You and I aren't together, Sebastian," she protests, her heart lodged painfully in her throat, panic clenching her gut. "I can do what I want with whoever I—" Sebastian grips her jaw forcefully, making her wise up and forcing her eyes to meet his own, which have turned gold, betraying his anger. "You're mine," he growls. "I'm not," batting his hand away. He catches hers between his fingers anyway, pulling her to him more carefully. "You could be," he says, sagging his forehead against hers softly. "I want you to be." Cass's heart does something complicated. Like a piece of it is suddenly going missing, pulled from her by force and perfectly against her, will to fly right into Sebastian's hands. Is this a trick? He just said she was a random wolf, throwing his title in her face like it's supposed to matter. She's going to be an alpha too. Doesn't that count for something? She's not his to claim. For what would it mean for her if he did? Her father would never accept it. Her father is going to choose her. Her father is counting on her. Why would Sebastian say this only now and not the day before when he'd held her in his arms, or all the ones before that when he'd had plenty of occasions? "Don't," she snaps, pulling away, throat tight. "We're nothing. You're nothing to me." Sebastian pales, searches her face, and looks like he wants to pull her back toward him. Cass finds herself kind of wishing he willed. Fine, he spits, turning around abruptly and walking away. Cass thinks of calling after him, her mouth opens on its own accord, but nothing comes past her lips. Is this at the moment when he grows tired of her? The next day, Sebastian answers her father's call to discuss the altercation from the bar and apologizes for approaching Cass, swearing it won't happen again. It doesn't sit well with Cass. She's dvatzit when her father lets her and her brother know he's decided to make her alpha, everything she's ever wanted. Everything she's worked toward her entire life is finally within reach. She had imagined this moment countless times as a child, picturing the pride and joy that would fill her upon hearing those words. But now, standing here, all she feels is nothing, numbness, emptiness. It has been like this ever since that night when Sebastian walked away from her. She managed to keep herself together, convincing herself it would all be worth it once she became alpha. Surely achieving this goal would bring him back, or at least give her some sense of fulfillment. But now, with the title hers, Cass isn't sure what she expected anymore. What does she even want? All she knows is that his absence feels unbearable, its weight pressing down on her heart more heavily with each passing day. That very morning, she learned of his engagement. He was to marry a girl from another pack soon. Cass barely remembers what the other girl looks like. She never paid much attention to her. The daughter of an alpha, hailing from an influential family. She was somewhat pretty, but what did that matter? Could she hunt as well as Cass could? Could she make love to him the way Cass had, learning every inch of his body, knowing exactly what he loved? Would she take care of him, make him happy the way Cass knew she could? Cass, her father asks tentatively, pulling her out of her thoughts. Cass realizes she hasn't said a word. Ronan, her brother, is also looking at her curiously, clearly surprised not to see the joy they expected from someone who had just achieved her lifelong dream. "Thank you, father," she mumbles, lowering her head. "I'm honored. I won't let you down." She wants to cry but doesn't understand why. Shouldn't she be happy? Why isn't she? Her father continues, addressing both of them. Raising from his seat, he moves toward the library, reaching for a book before unlocking a small hidden safe behind it. From inside, he pulls a dagger encased in a protective sheath. "This dagger," he says gravely, handing it to Ronan, "is one of the most important artifacts in our family. Passed down through generations, it holds immense power." Cass tenses slightly at the mention of artifacts tied to alliances, especially given recent events. Ronan frowns briefly, sensing her reaction, but quickly diverts his focus back to their father. "It's a weapon laced with a powerful poison," their father explains. "One prick of the skin and it can kill any wolf. Our ancestors used it in battles long past. Guard it carefully, son." Ronan nods solemnly, accepting the responsibility without hesitation. Yet, Cass pays no mind to the exchange. Her thoughts are elsewhere, consumed by darker musings. "As you both know," their father concludes grimly, "Sebastian will be taking the daughter of a powerful alpha as his mate. He claims it won't affect his judgment when negotiating alliances, but we all know better. Their union will shift the balance of power significantly." His words hang heavy in the air. "You'll have your work cut out for you, ensuring our pack thrives despite these changes. We cannot afford to fall under another's influence." The weight of his statement follows Cass as she retreats to her room later that evening. The part about being named Alpha doesn't linger in her mind, it's the rest of it. The reality that Sebastian is gone, truly gone, and that his future belongs to someone else, someone who isn't her. She sits on the edge of her bed, staring blankly at the wall. For years, becoming Alpha was supposed to mean everything. It was supposed to validate her existence, prove her worth not just to others, but to herself. Now, though, it feels hollow, empty, like a trophy awarded too late after the battle has already been lost. Ronan's voice echoes faintly in her memory. "Be careful with it, son." The dagger entrusted to him symbolizes trust, duty, legacy, all things Cass once thought she craved above all else. And yet, none of it matters if the person she loves is no longer by her side. None of it fills the void left behind by Sebastian's absence. Cass wonders if the girl he's marrying knows him the way she does. If she understands the way his jaw tightens when he's angry, or how his laughter softens when he thinks no one is listening. Does she know how he likes his coffee in the mornings, or the way his hands feel against bare skin? Cass doubts it. How could anyone else possibly know him the way she does? Still, there's nothing she can do. Nothing she will do. Because while she may feel broken, while she may ache for something she can never have, she still has responsibilities. Responsibilities to her pack, to her family. Becoming Alpha wasn't just about personal glory, it was about protecting those who depend on her. Even if it costs her everything. As dawn breaks over the horizon, casting pale light through her window, Cass makes a silent vow. She won't allow herself to fall apart, not completely. Not yet. There's work to be done, battles to fight, lives to protect. Maybe someday when the dust settles and the wounds aren't so raw, she'll find a way to move forward. Until then, she'll carry the burden alone. Cass gripped the edge of the marble countertop in the library, her knuckles white as she tried to steady herself. The faint scent of aged paper and polished wood filled the air, but it did little to calm her racing heart. She had fled here, away from the laughter and music that now felt like needles piercing her skin. Away from him. The dress she wore, her most beautiful one, felt suffocating now, its red silk clinging to her like a second layer of guilt. Her hair, styled so carefully into an elegant updo, seemed ridiculous in hindsight. What had she been thinking? That he would look at her once more with those piercing eyes and remember what they'd shared. That maybe, just maybe, there would be a flicker of regret in his gaze. But no, he hadn't spared her even a glance all night. She closed her eyes tightly against the sting of tears, willing herself not to break down completely. It wasn't supposed to hurt this much, not after all these years. Yet every laugh he shared with his fiancée, every touch of his hand on her arm or whisper in her ear, it was as though each moment drove another dagger into Cass's chest. And why shouldn't it? He was everything she could never have, powerful, untouchable, bound by duties and loyalties that left no room for someone like her. Her thoughts spiraled back to their past, fragmented memories of stolen moments under moonlit skies when hatred between their packs hadn't mattered. Or so she'd thought then. Back when Sebastian's smile had been hers alone, his words soft and genuine instead of sharp and indifferent. Back before duty claimed him entirely, chaining him to a life where love was secondary to alliances and power plays. A small noise startled her, a soft creak of the door opening behind her. Cass froze, unwilling to turn around, fearing who might walk through. When footsteps approached quietly, she braced herself, forcing her trembling hands to still. Cass! The voice was hesitant, familiar yet unexpected. Vivian stood there, concern etched across her face. As beta of the pack, she had always been fiercely protective of those under her care, especially Cass. "Are you all right?" Cass managed a weak smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine," she lied, straightening her posture despite the heaviness weighting her down. "Just needed some air." Vivian raised an eyebrow skeptically but didn't press further. Instead, she crossed the room and leaned casually against a nearby bookshelf. "You know, sometimes pretending everything is okay makes things worse." "I'm not pretending," Cass replied quickly, almost too quickly. She turned away, busying herself with smoothing non-existent wrinkles from her dress. "It's just a lot. You know how it is." Vivian sighed softly. "No, I don't. Not really. Because if I did, I wouldn't let anyone treat me the way you're letting him treat you tonight." Cass flinched at the truth in Vivian's words. "It doesn't matter anymore," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He's made his choice. We both have our roles to play." "And what role is that?" Vivian asked sharply, stepping closer. "To stand there and watch while he dances with someone else. To pretend your heart isn't breaking because it's easier than confronting the truth." "The truth," Cass snapped, anger flaring suddenly. "The truth is that nothing between us ever mattered to him. It was convenient until it wasn't. A distraction until something better came along. That's all I've ever been, a distraction." "That's not true," Vivian countered firmly. "You can't believe that. Not after everything you went through together." Cass shook her head bitterly. "Believe it. I lived it, Vivian. Every rejection, every cold shoulder, every reminder that I'll never be good enough for someone like him. So yes, I believe it. And tonight proves it." Vivian opened her mouth to respond but hesitated, studying Cass closely. There was pain there, raw and unrelenting, but also something else, defiance buried beneath layers of self-doubt. Finally, she said gently, "You deserve better than this, better than him." Cass laughed hollowly. "Deserve has nothing to do with it. This isn't about what I want or need. It's about survival. About doing what's expected of me, whether I like it or not. No, Vivian said firmly. That's where you're wrong. Survival doesn't mean losing yourself in the process. If anything, it means holding on to who you are even when everyone else tries to take that away. For a long moment, neither spoke. Cass stared at the floor, her mind racing with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to scream, to lash out at the world for being so cruel. Another part wanted to retreat, to hide away until the ache in her chest dulled enough to bear. But deep down, buried beneath years of conditioning and fear, was a spark of rebellion, a desire to fight back against the chains binding her. I don't know how to do that, Cass admitted finally, her voice trembling. I don't know how to stop caring about what others think or expect of me. You start small, Vivian said softly. One step at a time. Tonight, you leave this party early. Tomorrow you focus on yourself, not on him, not on the pack, not on anyone else. Just you. Cass nodded slowly, considering the idea. Leaving early sounded impossible, cowardly even. But staying meant enduring more pain than she could handle right now. Okay, she murmured. I'll try, Vivian smiled faintly, placing a reassuring hand on Cass's shoulder. Good. Now come on. Let's get you out of here before anyone notices. As they slipped out of the library and into the quiet corridors beyond, Cass felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. For the first time in hours, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, to imagine a future where her worth wasn't tied to someone else's approval. It was a fragile hope, easily shattered, but it was hers nonetheless. Outside, the cool night air greeted them, carrying with it the promise of freedom. Cass paused for a moment, glancing back toward the house where laughter still echoed. Somewhere inside, Sebastian was dancing with his fancy, oblivious to the storm raging within her. But she wasn't going to let him define her anymore. Not tonight. Not ever again. With Vivian by her side, Cass walked away, leaving behind the shadows of the past and stepping cautiously toward whatever lay ahead. Cassandra snaps her eyes open as Sebastian's silhouette slips into the library. His presence fills the room, searching and singular, unmistakably alone. What are you doing here? She blurts before thinking better of it. What am I doing here? Sebastian replies, his tone clipped. At my house. He raises an eyebrow, daring her to challenge him further. Cassandra says nothing, turning her head toward a row of books beside her. The silence stretches taut between them. She had stared at him all evening from across the crowded halls, but now, in this private space with no distractions, she finds herself unable to meet his gaze. I should be asking you that, Sebastian taunts, his voice laced with humor and something darker. It unnerves her more than she cares to admit. It isn't like you to hide away from a crowd. Cass flinches at his words. My father chose me to be our next alpha, she retorts, swaying the title like a shield meant to protect. But protect against what? She doesn't know, or perhaps won't let herself think about it. Sebastian's lips curl into a mockery of a smile. Well, congratulations then. It's everything you've always wanted, isn't it? Her response is immediate, a dark glare that he matches tenfold. Don't act like this hasn't been your goal too, she snaps, chin raised defiantly. I don't blame you, Sebastian interrupts, his mouth forming a tight line. Cass feels her stomach drop at the memory of those lips pressed against hers, the phantom touch lingering painfully sharp in her mind. Then what is this? She forces out, hating how fragile her voice sounds. Why did you follow me here? Have you come to gloat? Sebastian's expression shifts, complicated, unreadable. There are so many things Cass wants to say, each one poised on the edge of her tongue. But then he shakes his head and turns away. Have a good evening, Cassandra. I'll see you at the next alpha meeting. He moves toward the hand, already reaching for the handle, when Cass blurts out the question she swore she wouldn't ask. Do you love her? Her own desperation shocks her. She barely recognizes herself in the plea. Sebastian freezes mid-step, his shoulders visibly tensing. Slowly, he turns back around, a sneer twisting his features. Do I love her? Isn't that obvious? I'm marrying her, aren't I? The words hit Cass like a slap, made worse by the intensity of his gaze, the same gaze she'd spent years chasing, longing for, and now can't bear to hold. All right, she murmurs, forcing calm into her voice. Well then, I'm happy for you. Are you? Sebastian scoffs, crossing his arms. What's it to you how I feel anyway? We were never anything to each other. You've made that abundantly clear. His words are cruel, calculated, and they strike with precision, leaving her trembling. "So now you're going to act like there was never anything between us," she whispers, hurt bleeding through every syllable. Sebastian steps closer, his anger palpable. Cass hadn't realized how near he'd gotten until his scent overwhelms her senses, raw and unyielding. "You're the one who always acted like it was nothing," he barks, his face inches from hers. "Like it embarrassed you to be with me." Her mind spins, reeling under the weight of his proximity and fury. "I don't remember," she starts, but he cuts her off. "Don't," he growls, low and dangerous. "Don't lie to yourself, Cass. Not now, not after everything." She stares at him, breathless and undone, searching for some trace of the man she once knew. But all she sees is a stranger wearing his face, cold and distant. "You should go," she finally says, her voice hollow. For a moment, Sebastian hesitates, his jaw tightening as though he might say something more. Instead, he turns on his heel and walks out, leaving her alone in the suffocating quiet of the library. Pouring out her feelings at every chance, she argues, some fight left in her still, though it's that of an animal trapped in a corner. "I was the one that always had to earn your attention, some way or another," she says, voice trembling with barely contained emotion. Sebastian's reply is flat, devoid of inflection. "You didn't earn anything. You always had it." His words hang between them like smoke, thick and suffocating. "I've always looked at you, always, ever since we were young," he continues. But Cass cuts him off, desperation sharpening her tone. "No, you didn't. You'd look, but you wouldn't see me." Her voice cracks under the weight of years unspoken, grievances stacked high like stones on a grave. Sebastian growls, disgust lacing his words as if they taste bitter on his tongue. He cannot stand them, must rid himself of them. "I'm done now, it's over." His voice is mean, scathing, slicing through her defenses until she feels raw and exposed. Something stirs within her, a spark, a flicker of defiance, and she raises her hand to wipe her eyes because she's crying. She doesn't remember when it started. "It'll never be over," she tells him darkly. "You know it, and I know it." Before Sebastian can reply, she grabs his face, pulling him close, and their mouths collide in a bruising kiss. It's harsher than any they'd shared before, teeth clashing, tongues battling for dominance. Sebastian lays claim to her immediately, his scent flaring with hunger. One hand glides to the small of her back, while the other twists into her hair, pulling out the pins that had been keeping it in place. Long, heavy blonde curls tumble onto her shoulders, and Sebastian stares at them in awe before burying his nose in them, inhaling deeply. "I want nothing to do with you," he sighs, eyes closing shut as he breathes her in. "I love you," she replies, choking on her next words when she sees him flinch as though she's hurt him. "No," he says sharply, stepping away, refusing to meet her gaze. "Enough." Her mouth opens, tries to hold on to him, but he flees the room without looking back, leaving her alone, feeling as exposed and abandoned as ever. Later, she finds herself standing outside the magician's shop, though she realizes too late that it's closed. The time nears midnight, and she doesn't yet know that she'll be making her wish the very next day. Cass is still dvatset when she wakes up in her bed in the early hours of the morning, surprised and confused at the feel of wet lips sucking bruises onto her neck. She's certain she fell asleep alone and should feel fear and distress at this unexpected intrusion, but instead, warmth pools low in her belly, spreading outward in waves of hazy pleasure. A familiar scent envelops her, mingling with hers in a way she hasn't experienced in years but has craved all the more. She becomes aware of the hard press of a body against hers, of hands gripping her hips. But the touch feels so natural, so right, that she doesn't even think about moving away. "Sebastian," she asks breathlessly, feeling him smile against her neck. Through the darkness, she meets his eyes, they're blown wide, dark with desire and something else she can't quite place. "What are you doing here?" she asks hesitantly, grazing his cheek with her fingertips. He doesn't answer, not with words anyway. Instead, he kisses her again, softer this time, slower, as if savoring every second. His fingers trail down her side, leaving goosebumps in their wake. She shivers, arching into his touch, and he groans softly, the sound vibrating against her skin. "I thought you didn't want me," she whispers, her voice trembling. He pauses, resting his forehead against hers. For a moment, he looks torn, conflicted, but then his expression hardens. "I don't," he says firmly, though his actions betray him. His hands continue to roam, his lips tracing patterns along her collarbone. Then why, she begins, but he silences her with another kiss, deeper, more insistent. She loses herself in it, surrendering to the heat coiling tighter within her. When he finally pulls away, his breathing is ragged, uneven. "Don't make me regret this," he mutters almost to himself. She wants to tell him that she won't. That she'll do whatever it takes to prove him wrong, but the words catch in her throat. Instead, she nods, wrapping her arms around him, holding on as if afraid he might disappear. And maybe he will. Maybe this is just another fleeting moment stolen from reality, destined to slip through her fingers like sand. But for now, she lets herself believe it's real, lets herself drown in the sensation of being wanted, even if only for a little while. As dawn breaks, casting pale light through the window, she lies awake beside him, watching the rise and fall of his chest. She wonders how long she can hold on to this fragile piece before it shatters again. Her fingers twitch nervously, though she knows his presence here, uninvited in the middle of the night, is far from wise. Still, she doesn't want him to think he's unwelcome or worse, to see him leave because she said the wrong thing. Her mind feels hazy with sleep, and rationality seems just out of reach. She hadn't expected to see him again so soon, not like this. Not when he pulls her close and claims her mouth in a slow, heated kiss that leaves her breathless. The press of his tongue against hers makes her moan in delight. But the taste of alcohol on his lips causes her to pull back in surprise. "You've been drinking," she accuses, her voice tinged with puzzlement as she studies his face. He chuckles softly, burying his nose in the crook of her neck, inhaling deeply. For a moment, she allows herself to run her fingers through his hair, savoring the familiar scent of him before forcing herself to push him away, just as she knows she should. "What about your engagement?" she asks hesitantly, even as Sebastian's hands roam over her bare leg, sending shivers up her spine. His touch is intoxicating, but guilt lingers at the edges of her thoughts. "Shouldn't you be with your fiancé instead of here?" Sebastian mutters something unintelligible against her skin, his warm breath sending goosebumps across her flesh. Cass rolls her eyes, attempting to create distance between them by gripping his shoulders firmly. "What did you say?" she demands, her tone sharper now. "I don't have a fiancé," he replies, his gaze darkening as he leans in again, clearly intent on kissing her once more. But Cass moves her head just out of reach, frustration flickering in her expression. "What do you mean? Why are you here?" she presses, searching his eyes for answers. They're filled with longing, though clouded by intoxication. "I broke it off," he murmurs, grinding his hips against hers in a way that makes her gasp. "I couldn't marry someone else when I love you." "Sebastian," she protests weakly, trying to ignore the warmth pooling low in her belly. "You said you wanted nothing to do with me." He groans, pressing feverish kisses along her jawline. "How could I want anyone else when I love you? When you're the only one who matters." His words send a jolt through her, and tears well in her eyes despite herself. I thought you hated me," she whispers brokenly, her resolve crumbling under the weight of his confession. "Say it again," he pleads, cradling her face between his hands. "Tell me you love me again." She meets his gaze, her heart pounding wildly. "I love you," she murmurs, watching as his pupils dilate with satisfaction. It's always been like this, her entire life revolving around ensuring he would look at her, only her. And now, seeing the intensity in his eyes, she feels that same need flare within her. Her scent spikes sharply, and Sebastian notices immediately, his movements becoming more urgent. His teeth graze her collarbone, eliciting a sharp intake of breath from her. "Cass," he growls, his voice rough with desire. Her hands fist in his shirt as she tries to regain control, pulling him back for another kiss. "I can't do this anymore," she whispers against his lips, though her body betrays her with every move. "I love you. I need you." "Then you'll have me," he replies, his voice thick with promise. She nods, unable to resist pulling him closer, even as logic screams at her to stop. "Just, maybe not right now. Not in my parents' house while you're drunk." But Sebastian seems deaf to anything beyond her earlier admission. With renewed determination, he tugs at the hem of her nightgown, his movements frantic. "I've been going wild thinking about you tonight," he rasps, pinning her beneath him. "Sebastian, please," she begs, torn between desire and reason. Yet as his lips find hers again, all coherent thought slips away, leaving only the undeniable truth of their connection and the chaos it brings. Cassandra's body sank into the mattress, her skin flush with heat as Sebastian hovered over her, his weight pressing her deeper into the softness beneath. His mouth claimed hers again, and she moaned softly when his tongue met hers, teasing and tasting in a way that felt so atchingly familiar. It was intoxicating, his fingers trailing fire across her skin, his scent wild and dizzying, wrapping around her like a thick fog. She wondered briefly if she'd been drinking, because this couldn't be real, could it? Not when his teeth grazed her neck, sending shivers racing down her spine. Sebastian, she gasped, her toes curling involuntarily at the pressure of his lips against her throat. Don't please stop. But even as the words left her mouth, her body betrayed her, tilting her head further to bare her neck to him. Her mind screamed no, but her body was already giving in, yielding to the primal pull between them. And then his teeth sank into her skin, sharp and possessive, and Cassandra cried out, not entirely from pain. Before she could process what was happening, another voice tore through the room, raw and anguished. Ronan. Her brother. Suddenly, Sebastian was yanked off her, his features twisting in agony as he gasped above her. Ronan stood there, chest heaving, his expression a storm of fury and disbelief. How had he gotten here? What had he seen or heard? Get off her! Ronan barked, his voice cracking under the weight of emotion. Cassandra froze, stunned into silence by his sudden appearance. She needed to explain, to make him understand, but before she could form the words, Sebastian slumped against her, groaning in pain. When she tried to steady him, her fingers brushed something wet and warm dripping down his back. Blood. The metallic tang hit her nostrils before she even looked at her hands, now stained crimson. Cass, are you okay? Ronan demanded, his fear palpable as he pulled Sebastian away from her. Did he force himself on you? Fear and shock rendered Cassandra mute. Carefully, she rolled Sebastian onto his side, cradling his head in her lap. His jaw clenched tightly, eyes flickering open just long enough to meet hers before fluttering shut again. What did you do? She screeched at Ronan, panic clawing at her throat. Her gaze darted to the dagger in her brother's hand, the same one their father kept locked away, and understanding crashed over her like ice water. He was hurting you, Ronan insisted, though doubt flickered behind his eyes. He seemed to be trying to convince himself as much as her. No, he wasn't. I love him. Cassandra shot back, desperation sharpening her tone. Ronan, Sebastian, and I have been lovers for years. Her brother's eyes, but she barely registered his reaction. Sebastian murmured her name weakly, his grip on her wrist faltering as consciousness slipped away from him. God, he breathed, his voice barely audible. Stay with me, she pleaded, running trembling fingers through his hair. Don't fall asleep, please. Her voice cracked, thick with terror. When his eyelids fluttered closed despite her pleas, her gaze snapped back to Ronan. In his eyes she saw accusations, fear, and unspoken questions. But they were twins, they shared an unspoken bond, and he seemed to recognize that now wasn't the time for interrogations. I'm going to get father, he said abruptly, spinning on his heel and bolting from the room. Cassandra barely noticed him leave. All her focus was on Sebastian, his breathing shallow and uneven. She pressed her hands firmly against the wound on his back, trying to staunch the flow of blood while tears streamed down her face. You can't leave me, she whispered brokenly, leaning down to press her forehead against his. Not like this. Her mind raced, replaying everything that had led to this moment. They'd been reckless, careless in their secrecy. For years, they'd hidden their relationship, knowing full well how dangerous it was. Their families were rivals, their union forbidden, but none of that mattered when they were together. Until tonight. Tonight. Everything had unraveled. She glanced toward the door, half expecting Ronan to return with their father in tow. What would happen then? Would they listen to her explanation, or would they see only betrayal? The thought made her stomach churn. She tightened her grip on Sebastian, willing him to hold on just a little longer. Time stretched endlessly, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, hurried footsteps echoed outside the room, and Ronan reappeared, followed closely by their father. The elder man took in the scene with a single sweeping glance. Cassandra covered in blood, Sebastian unconscious and pale, and Ronan clutching the dagger still slick with gore. What happened here? Their father demanded, his voice low and commanding. Cassandra swallowed hard, forcing herself to speak through the lump in her throat. "It's not what it looks like," she began, her voice shaking. "Ronan misunderstood. He thought Sebastian was attacking me, but we're together. We've always been together." Their father's expression darkened, his gaze shifting between the three of them. "Explain yourself," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. And so Cassandra told them everything: the secret meetings, the stolen moments, the love that had grown between her and Sebastian despite the odds. She left nothing out, knowing that honesty was the only chance they had. As she spoke, she kept her eyes fixed on her father, searching for any sign of understanding or mercy. But his face remained unreadable, a mask of stone. When she finished, silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Ronan looked torn, guilt warring with confusion in his eyes. Their father, however, simply stared at Sebastian's prone form, his jaw tightening imperceptibly. "We'll deal with this in the morning," he said finally, turning to leave. "For now, tend to him. If he survives, we'll decide what comes next." As soon as he was gone, Cassandra let out a shaky breath, relief and dread warring within her. Survival was only the first hurdle. They still had a long road ahead. But for now, all that mattered was keeping Sebastian alive. Cassandra would make her wish in exactly 2 hours, but before that, one last conversation would take place. "How could you be so foolish, both of you?" Their father was unsurprisingly furious when presented with the alpha from their rival pack, lying unconscious and half-naked in their daughter's bed. "How could you let him come here?" Cass's father sneered at her before turning to Ronan. "Did you use this weapon on him when you could have just thrown him off your sister?" I thought Ronan couldn't bring himself to say the words, shame twisting his features. Their father rubbed a tired hand over his face. "This is catastrophic." He muttered more to himself than to them. "One of you, if not both, are going to have to face consequences." For he waved his hand toward Sebastian's unconscious body, currently being tightly held by Cass. "Our pack's reputation is going to take a serious hit, and let's not even get into the monetary damages we'll need to pay." "Are you really talking about money and reputation while he's lying here dying?" Cassandra snapped, appalled. Sebastian's face was pale and glistening with feverish sweat. His breathing labored. Only sheer will, the desire to keep him alive at all costs, stopped her from crumbling down. "Is there nothing that can heal him?" she asked her father almost reluctantly, for she was afraid to hear the answer. It came nonetheless terrible in its finality. "None," he said, a slightly more emphatic look crossing his features. "I'm sorry, Cass. Why would you even keep such a dangerous weapon at home?" she growled, tears prickling her eyes. "Why not bury it?" Her father shushed her with a snarl. "I keep it to protect my family," he replied, making Cass snarl back. "Sebastian is like family," she said. "He's my mate now." Her father's eyes widened in anger. "Your mate? How?" "The usual way," she sniffed, kissing Sebastian's forehead when she heard him moan in pain. She watched in disgusted consternation as her father began to pace the room, the beginning of a plan seemingly forming itself in his mind. "We can work with that," he muttered under his breath. "Sebastian's an alpha. He forced his way into your room at night, forced himself on you, and claimed you. Your brother defended you." "I wanted him to claim me," Cass protested furiously. "Well, you'll keep that to yourself if you want you and your brother to live," her father barked, lacing his words with all the alpha command he could muster, which, to his credit, was a lot. Cass felt the order freezing her body all the way down her spine. "Ronan, come with me." "Cass, stay here with him. We'll need to prepare for council meetings and stand for trial. If we get a head start and have the packs come to us instead of waiting for Sebastian's people to confront us, it'll look better." Cass was left alone, faced with her desolation and her mate's dying breaths. She held his face against her chest, murmuring comforting words to him in the faint hope that they should reach him somehow and make him hold on a little longer. "I'm going to fix this," she told him. "You're going to be okay. I promise." Cass banged on the magician's front door, desperation clawing at her throat. She had no other options left. When the door finally creaked open, revealing a wizened figure cloaked in shadows, Cass didn't hesitate. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking. "You have to help me. My mate, he's dying. There's no cure, no magic strong enough to save him, but maybe there's something you can do. Something only someone like you would know." The magician studied her for a long moment, his piercing gaze seeming to strip away every layer of her resolve until she stood bare before him. "What makes you think I'd risk my own neck for the likes of you?" he asked, his tone low and gravelly. "Because I'll do anything," Cass replied without hesitation. And anything, it turned out, meant everything. The magician agreed to craft a potion, but the ingredients were rare and perilous. Each one required a sacrifice, whether it be a memory, a piece of her soul, or worse. Still, Cass didn't flinch. She followed his instructions precisely, venturing into cursed forests where whispers echoed louder than screams, scaling cliffs slick with venomous moss, and bargaining with creatures whose very presence made her skin crawl. Along the way, doubts crept in. Was she truly doing the right thing? Could she live with herself if saving Sebastian meant losing part of who she was? But every time those thoughts surfaced, she silenced them with the image of his face. Pale and fragile, gasping for air, no cost was too great. When she returned with the final ingredient, a drop of starlight stolen from the heart of a collapsing galaxy, the magician worked quickly. His hands moved with practiced precision, blending and stirring the concoction until it shimmered like liquid moonlight. "Drink this," he instructed, handing her the vial. "But remember, healing comes with a price. Whatever bond you share with him will deepen, intertwine, become unbreakable. Are you prepared for that?" Cass hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Yes," she whispered. For him, always. Back at home, Sebastian lay motionless, his chest rising and falling in shallow bursts. Cass knelt beside him, cradling his head gently. "I'm sorry," she murmured, pressing the vial to his lips. The potion flowed into him like fire, igniting a glow beneath his skin. His body arched, trembling violently, and for a moment Cass feared she'd made a terrible mistake. Then, slowly, color returned to his cheeks, his breathing steadied, and his eyes fluttered open. They locked onto hers, filled with confusion and something else. Recognition. "Love. Cassandra," he rasped, his voice weak but steady. "You saved me." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No," she said. "We save each other." And as he reached up to cup her cheek, she realized the truth. Whatever price she'd paid, whatever scars remained, they paled in comparison to the life they now had ahead of them. Together, news of Sebastian's survival spread faster than wildfire, igniting tensions between the two packs. While some saw his recovery as a miracle, others viewed it as an act of defiance. Council members demanded answers, accusing Cassandra's family of harboring secrets that undermined pack alliances. Rumors swirled about forbidden magic, illicit bonds, and treachery. Meanwhile, within their own ranks, whispers of betrayal festered. Ronin struggled to maintain peace among their wolves, many of whom questioned why they should risk war for the sake of one man, even if that man was an alpha. Loyalties fractured, friendships strained, and the once unified pack found itself teetering on the brink of chaos. For Cassandra and Sebastian, the challenges were no less daunting. The bond forged through the potion bound them in ways neither fully understood. Emotions amplified, instincts sharpened, and moments of clarity often gave way to overwhelming waves of connection. At times it felt suffocating, at others exhilarating. Yet amidst the turmoil, they clung to each other, drawing strength from the shared belief that love, not power or fear, would see them through. As they navigated the tangled web of politics and prejudice, they vowed to rewrite the story of their packs, proving that unity could rise from even the deepest divides. As the sun barely rises in the sky, begging for him to open up. What feels like hours in reality barely lasts over 5 minutes because I'm a light sleeper and quick to rush down and let her in. "Please," she begs, grabbing my hand. "We don't have much time. Go get your boss." Normally, I wouldn't dare wake Adrian under any circumstances for fear of getting cursed or worse, but I know Cass. And I know he likes her well enough, so I'm hopeful he'll forgive me for it. When faced with sheer desperation marking her features, Adrian follows me into the living room a short while later, hair a mess though it often is, only to be greeted by Cass's terrified yet determined gaze. "This time there'll be no changing my mind," she declares, standing up from her chair and clenching her fingers. "You're going to grant me a wish. I don't care what it costs." Cass hasn't aged a day when she comes back to the pack's headquarters, but she feels like she's become an old woman. Her body is sore and slow, each movement heavy and difficult. Colors, smells, and sounds all seem different now, dulled. Like she's entered a new watered-down dimension where everything feels cold quickly. Mostly, she feels empty and alone, barely realizing she's arrived back at the pack when her brother erupts from their home, waving at her excitedly. Sebastian's awake, he tells her, grabbing her hands. He's fine. They're discussing what happened with father and the other alphas, but since he isn't sick anymore, it's all going to be okay. Ronan interrupts himself when he notices his sister's distant, empty gaze. Did you hear me? She's heard him and feels infinitely better knowing Sebastian is healed, though she had no doubt he would be since it's what she'd wished for. Cass, Ronan insists, grabbing her shoulders, what's with the long face? Are you still angry with me? You can relax. Your mate's fine. He isn't my mate, Cass replies, staring down at her feet, which she only realizes now are bare. But I thought you said. That was before, Cass says, interrupting Ronan and moving away. Behind them, their mother exits the house and sprints toward them. Cassandra, where have you been? She demands. They're asking for you inside. What's this I hear about you and Sebastian being mates? We're not, Cass replies, tone flat. Their voices sound different now. She thinks it's like when you hear yourself on film, and don't recognize the sound of your voice. It's like that, except with everything. What's wrong? Cass's mother asks, taking her face between her hands. What happened, baby? Cass doesn't reply, keeping her eyes firmly down. It's not that she doesn't want to, it's that the words are stuck in her throat. She thinks maybe if she doesn't say them, it won't be true. Cass, her mother insists, before finally it clicks and her eyes widen in horror. Oh my God, she exclaims softly at first, then more loudly. There's ringing in Cass's ears, and her feet are cold against the grass. Her mother is screaming in horror, and Cass can't move. Time seems to stretch endlessly as the world around her blurs. The screams pierce through her like shards of glass, sharp and unrelenting. She wants to explain, to make sense of it all, but nothing makes sense anymore, not the pain. Not the guilt, not the emptiness gnawing at her chest. Ronan steps forward, confusion etched across his face, but even he hesitates, unsure how to bridge the gap between them. His hand reaches out tentatively, but he pulls back before making contact, as if afraid she might shatter under his touch. The air grows heavier with every passing second until it becomes suffocating. Cass tries to focus on something, anything to ground herself. The way the morning light filters through the trees, casting fragmented shadows on the ground, the faint scent of damp earth lingering after last night's rain, the chirping of birds somewhere far off, oblivious to the chaos unfolding below. But none of it anchors her. Instead, she feels untethered, adrift in a sea of emotions too vast and turbulent to navigate. Her mother's cries soften into sobs, raw and guttural, filled with a grief that seems almost unbearable. Cass watches her crumple to the ground, hands clutching at her own hair as though trying to pull herself together. Ronan kneels beside her, murmuring words Cass can't quite catch, his voice trembling with uncertainty. He looks up at her once, pleading silently for answers she isn't ready or perhaps able to give. And then there's silence of fragile, brittle kind that feels more oppressive than the noise before it. The weight of unspoken truths hangs thick in the air, pressing down on everyone present. Cass knows she should say something, anything, to break the tension, but her lips remain sealed shut, refusing to cooperate. Words feel inadequate anyway, trivial compared to the magnitude of what she's brought upon them. Eventually, her mother stands, wiping tears from her cheeks with shaky hands. Her eyes meet Cass's, searching for some semblance of understanding, but all she finds is a void. Tell me, she whispers hoarsely, voice cracking under the strain. Tell me everything. For a moment, Cass considers running, fleeing the scene entirely, and disappearing into the wilderness where no one can find her. But she stays rooted to the spot, immobilized by both duty and shame. Taking a deep breath, she begins to speak, haltingly at first, then with increasing urgency. She recounts the events leading up to this moment, the choices she made, the sacrifices she endured, the promises she broke. Each word feels like a stone dropped into an abyss, echoing endlessly without resolution. As she speaks, fragments of memories resurface, flashes of faces, moments shared and lost forever. She sees Sebastian lying pale and lifeless, feels the crushing weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders once again. She remembers the bargain struck in desperation, the price paid in blood and regret. And she recalls the look in Adrian's eyes when he realized what she'd done, a mixture of anger, pity, and something else she couldn't quite place. When she finishes speaking, exhaustion overtakes her, leaving her swaying slightly on her feet. No one says anything for a long while, digesting the enormity of what they've just learned. Finally, Ronan clears his throat, breaking the spell. "So that's it?" he asks, voice barely above a whisper. "That's why you've been gone all this time?" Cass nods mutely, unable to summon any more words. Her mother lets out another sob, collapsing back onto the grass, while Ronan stares at her with an expression torn between disbelief and sorrow. For the first time in what feels like forever, Cass allows herself to cry, not quietly or discreetly, but openly, letting the tears stream down her face unchecked. She feels hollow, emptied out, yet somehow lighter, as if shedding the burden of secrecy has freed her, however temporarily. The sun climbs higher in the sky, its warmth doing little to dispel the chill that lingers within her. Around her, the world continues to spin, indifferent to the turmoil raging inside. Yet amidst the wreckage of broken trust and shattered dreams, a flicker of hope remains, a fragile ember waiting to be fanned back into flame. Cassandra couldn't bring herself to meet her mother's gaze as Ronan joined in with the barrage of questions. She assumed he was distressed, though she wasn't entirely certain anymore. In the past, his emotions would have saturated the air around him, carried through his scent. But now Cass could barely smell anything not him, not the earthy tang of the forest outside, not even the faintest trace of herself. It was strange and terrifying, this absence of sensory connection that had always grounded her. The magician's words echoed in her mind. "Your wish for your mate to recover." His somber expression suggested he understood what was at stake. After all these years, she'd knew better than to try changing Cassandra's mind. He simply nodded, tears pooling in his eyes before he spoke again. "He's dying," Adrienne interjected quietly, glancing between them. "I've told you the rules before," she'd continued solemnly. "If I grant your wish, I'll have to take what matters most to you." Cass frowned deeply. Sebastian mattered more than anything else in her world. Did that mean if she'd saved him, he'd only— Adrienne shook his head preemptively. "They don't take existing people," he clarified. "But if Sebastian truly is what matters most, and let me emphasize, if because we can never be sure, then what will happen is that you'll likely have to be apart from him." "He'll leave, but—" She'd trailed off meaningfully. Cass felt her shoulders slump under the weight of his implication. If given the choice between letting Sebastian die or resigning herself to losing him forever, she already knew which path she'd choose. Though it terrified her, she still harbored hope that somehow they might find their way back to each other someday. For so long, she had been afraid of loving him freely, shackled by fears she no longer wanted dictating her life. Now determination burned within her. She wanted to fight for him. "Do it," she said firmly, raising her chin. "Save him. That's my wish." Adrienne reached for her hand then, closing his eyes momentarily. The silence stretched taut until he abruptly released her grip. His conflicted gaze locked onto hers. "You're with child," he announced, his tone measured yet heavy with significance. Cass stared at him, shock rooting her to the spot. Her thoughts scrambled, disbelief warring with a sudden clarity that made her stomach churn. She opened her mouth to protest but stopped herself mid-sentence. Realization dawned across her features, sharp and undeniable. "It hasn't even been 24 hours since," she faltered, unable to finish. Instead, she asked hesitantly, "You can feel it?" Adrienne studied her carefully. "Can you?" She nodded reluctantly, pressing a hand to her abdomen as though seeking confirmation from her own body. "I think so," she murmured, "or at least my wolf does. It feels protective already." A knot of anxiety tightened in her chest. What does this mean? Is there a risk the wish could harm the child? For a moment, Adrienne looked torn, his usual composure wavering. Then he sighed heavily. "Let me explain something first," he began, breaking one of his cardinal rules about revealing losses ahead of time. "I'm going to tell you exactly what I'll be taking before you make the wish." Her breath hitched. "But you said," she started to argue, only for Adrienne's icy stare to cut her off. Words failed her under the intensity of his gaze. "It's fine," Cass muttered, startled but too preoccupied with the enormity of her decision to dwell on his breach of protocol. Time was slipping away too quickly. "We don't have much time," she urged, desperation creeping into her voice. Adrienne grasped her hand once more, his touch firm and grounding as he closed his eyes to focus. The air seemed to hum with latent energy, charged by the power of magic beginning to flow. "What matters most to you," he intoned gravely, "is being Sebastian's mate. So I'll ensure you'll never be able to fulfill that role." Cass nodded numbly, having anticipated as much, but when Adrienne continued, his next words struck her like a physical blow. "By taking away the very thing that makes it possible." Her heart clenched painfully as understanding crashed over her. To save Sebastian, to give him life while sacrificing her place beside him, meant losing an integral part of herself. The bond that tied her to him, the essence of who she was as a werewolf, would vanish. And along with it, perhaps any chance of reclaiming what they'd shared. Tears pricked her eyes, blurring her vision, but she swallowed hard against the lump in her throat. This was her choice, her burden to bear. For Sebastian, she would endure it. Whatever came next, whatever fragments remained of her shattered future, she vowed to face it head-on. Possible Cass froze in place as understanding dawned on her features. "You mean my wolf?" she'd ask eventually, her voice toneless. "You're going to make her human." I summarized more for myself than for Cass. "Yep," Adrienne had said. Cass put her hand on her stomach, looking very much heartbroken. "But my baby, he'll have a wolf surely," she whispered, eyes brimming with tears. "There's a good chance, yes," Adrienne replied gravely. "You probably won't be able to raise him." He looked paler than usual, slightly ashen, the result of breaking the rules to tell Cass about what she'd been losing. I realized but kept to myself. Our client had enough on her plate as it was. Cass closed her eyes, taking a deep though shaking breath. "Do it," she said in a toneless voice. "Grant my wish." Cass hadn't felt her wolf leave her body. 1 minute she could feel it howling painfully against her broken mind, and the next, it was gone like it had never been there. It hadn't hurt exactly, but the abrupt dulling of her senses, the uncomfortable physical sensations, had made her gasp in shock. But mostly it was this absence, this nothingness in her mind, that made her sway on her feet and scream. Now she was back with her pack, but she couldn't sense them, guess their emotions through their sense, or know by instinct how to act or react to them. It was frightening, but not as devastating as feeling so alone and broken, like she'd lost not just a limb but an entire part of herself. "How is this possible?" Ronan asks, searching Cass's face while her mother begins to cry, alerting her father, whose head erupts from the house to check what's going on. "It was the magician," she explains in a toneless voice because it doesn't matter now. "The one who grants wishes and lives in town. You went to see him." Cassandra doesn't hear, feel, or sense Sebastian's presence immediately, so it's slightly disconcerting when he suddenly enters her field of vision. At first there's a bright hopeful smile on his face at the sight of her, but it falls immediately when he meets Cass's gaze. "What's wrong?" he asks quickly, making his way to them, followed by another alpha who must have been here to judge what had happened earlier with him and Ronan. "Did this magician do this to you?" "Take your wolf," Ronan asks, looking pale and shocked. "I asked him to," she explains before their brother or father can get it into their heads to attack Adrienne for what he'd done. "Why would you do that?" her brother laments. Sebastian reaches them, pushing his weight forward and taking her face between his hands. "Look at me," he asks her, but she doesn't. It hurts to look at him, knowing he'll never be hers now. "That's how he healed her," her father says as he sends Sebastian a somber gaze. "Magic." Sebastian ignores him, focused on softly asking Cass to look at him again, grazing her cheek with his thumb. She pulls away. "I'd like to be alone now," she tells them. She flees before anybody can retort, ignoring the fact that, with her being human now, they could all easily catch up to her. It probably means something. Something she doesn't want to think about. The forest feels alien without her heightened senses. The air is still and quiet, lacking the symphony of life she used to hear. Every step feels heavier, unfamiliar, as if gravity itself has turned against her. Her legs carry her farther from the pack, farther from everything she knows, until she collapses against the rough bark of a tree, her chest heaving with sobs she can no longer suppress. The loss is overwhelming, not just of her wolf but of the identity tied to it. The pack bond that once hummed beneath her skin is silent, a void where warmth and connection used to reside. She feels untethered, adrift in a world that suddenly seems too large, too loud, too empty. And yet, amidst the grief, there's a flicker of resolve, a stubborn ember refusing to be extinguished. She made this choice, painful as it was, for her child. For the life growing inside her. Fragile and unknowing. If giving up her wolf meant giving her baby a chance at humanity, then so be it. Minutes stretch into hours, though time feels irrelevant. Eventually, footsteps approach, hesitant, deliberate. She doesn't need heightened hearing to recognize them. Sebastian. Of course it would be him. He doesn't speak right away, simply stands a few paces away, his presence both comforting and unbearable. When he finally does speak, his voice is low, tinged with pain. "Why didn't you tell me?" She laughs bitterly, the sound hollow. "Would it have changed anything? Would you have let me go through with it if you knew?" "No," he admits after a pause. "But that's not fair to decide for you." "Fair," she echoes, anger rising like bile in her throat. "You think any of this is fair? My wolf was part of me, Sebastian, part of who I am or was. And now," her voice cracks, and she presses her palms to her eyes, willing the tears to stop. "Now I'm nothing. Just a shell of what I used to be." "You're not nothing," he insists, moving closer. His hand hovers near hers, as if unsure whether to touch her. "You're still Cass. Still fierce, still brave. Losing your wolf doesn't change that. It changes everything," she whispers. "It changes how I see myself, how the pack sees me, how you see me." His jaw tightens, and for a moment, he looks as lost as she feels. "I don't care about your wolf, Cass. I care about you, always have." The words hit her like a punch to the gut, leaving her breathless. She wants to believe him, desperately. But trust feels like a luxury she can no longer afford. "Don't," she says sharply, pulling away. "Don't say things you don't mean." "I mean it," he fires back, frustration bleeding into his tone. "Why do you always assume the worst of me, of yourself? You're worth more than you think, Cass. More than any of us." Her laugh is brittle, edged with despair. "You don't get to decide my worth, Sebastian." "Not anymore." They sit in silence after that, the weight of unspoken truths hanging heavy between them. Eventually, he leaves, his footsteps fading into the distance. Alone again, Cass lets herself cry until there are no tears left, until exhaustion claims her. Sleep comes fitfully, plagued by dreams of wolves howling in the dark, their voices echoing with longing and loss. When she wakes, the sun is rising, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. The world feels softer somehow, less harsh. She knows the road ahead will be difficult, that the wounds both visible and invisible will take time to heal. But as she places a hand over her stomach, feeling the faint flutter of life within, she allows herself a small measure of hope. This sacrifice wasn't for nothing. Her child will have a future. A chance to live free of the burdens she carried. And maybe, just maybe, she'll find a way to rebuild herself, piece by broken piece, into someone stronger than before. For now that's enough. None of them do. Cass is 20 when Sebastian insists on seeing her. It has been a week since the incident, during which her birthday came and went unnoticed. She doesn't notice much these days, just vague sounds of her brother arguing with her lover outside her door. She doesn't want to see anybody, Ronan says, or something along those lines. "I don't care, it's been days." "I need to talk to her," Sebastian insists. Muttering something else Cass can't make out before he bursts into her room. Cass sits by the window, still hugging her knees, her hair a loose mess against her back. Sebastian freezes when he sees her, and she thinks she must look pathetic, the bags under her eyes, the blankness in her scent. "Cass," Sebastian breathes, as if the word has somehow unlocked his ability to breathe again. He drops to his knees beside her, pulling her into his arms. Cass tells herself not to get used to it. "What are you doing here?" she asks, her voice flat and lifeless. "What do you think?" Sebastian sighs, breathing her in deeply. "Do I smell strange?" she blurts, the tremor in her voice betraying how fragile she feels. Sebastian buries his face in her hair. "You smell like you always do, but fainter." His tone is careful, like he's afraid to break her. Cass closes her eyes. "It's good that you came," she whispers, feeling his shoulders sag in relief. "I've been wanting to talk to you," Sebastian says softly. Cass lets out a hollow laugh. "You've been wanting to talk. Is that why everyone's been forcefully keeping me away from you this last week?" She ignores his last comment because if she doesn't speak now, she doesn't think she'll be able to get the words out. She's been preparing to say them for days, repeating them in her mind ever since she made her wish. "I'm sorry I disrupted your engagement," she says, staring out the window because she can't bear to look at him. Sebastian laughs again, but it's strained. Don't be. I'm sure if you try hard enough, your mate-to-be will reconsider, Cass interrupts sharply. And if not, there are plenty of others who... What are you talking about? Sebastian cuts in, sounding genuinely confused. You're my mate, he says firmly. I'm no such thing, Cass snaps, choking on the words. I'm human now. So what? You know as well as I do that mating bonds don't exist with humans. That was the entire reason. Her voice trails off. She doesn't tell him that becoming human was her choice, her desperate attempt to sever their connection. Sebastian falls silent for a moment, though he doesn't let go of her. Does this bother you? He finally asks. That we can't be bonded. Cass's stomach drops. Is he really so indifferent about the fact that they can no longer be together? When I told you I loved you, I meant it, she says, tears welling up in her eyes for the first time in days, as if they'd been waiting for him to arrive to escape all along. Or did you think I was just saying it to aggravate you? Sebastian looks startled, pained. I meant it too, he quickly interjects, searching her gaze. Cass rolls her eyes. You never actually said it, she mutters, hiding her face between her knees. She feels Sebastian tighten his arms around her. Then let me say it now. I love you, Cass. Human or not, bonded or not, it doesn't change anything. Her chest tightens painfully. Stop lying to me, she whispers. I'm not lying, he insists, gripping her shoulders and forcing her to meet his eyes. Why would I lie about something like this? Because you feel sorry for me, she spits bitterly. Because I ruined everything for you. Your future everything. Sebastian shakes his head fiercely. You didn't ruin anything. If anything, you saved me. Do you have any idea how miserable I was before you? How empty my life felt? Cass stares at him, unsure whether to believe him or not. But you're supposed to marry someone else. Someone who can give you everything I can't. He cups her face in his hands. No one could ever give me what you do, not even close. Being with you isn't about duty or obligation, it's about choice. And I choose you, Cass, always. For a moment, she lets herself believe him. She leans into his touch, closing her eyes as his warmth envelops her. But then reality crashes back down. It doesn't matter, she murmurs, pulling away. Even if you mean it, it changes nothing. We can't be together. Not like this. Sebastian grabs her hand before she can retreat further. Then tell me what to do. Tell me how to fix this. There's nothing to fix, she says softly. This is how it has to be. No, he growls, his grip tightening. I refuse to accept that. There has to be another way. Cass shakes her head sadly. There isn't. And even if there were, it wouldn't be fair to you. You deserve someone whole, someone who isn't broken like me. You're not broken, Sebastian insists fiercely. You're the strongest person I know. Don't you dare call yourself otherwise. Tears spill down her cheeks despite her best efforts to hold them back. I wish I could believe that, she whispers. Sebastian pulls her into his arms again, holding her tightly as if he's afraid she'll disappear. Then let me help you believe it, he murmurs against her hair. Let me show you. Cass wants to push him away, to insist that he leave her alone, but she's too tired to fight anymore. For now, she allows herself to lean into him, to take comfort in the one thing she swore she'd never let herself have again. Outside, the world continues to spin, oblivious to the storm raging within her heart. But for this fleeting moment, none of that matters. All that exists is the steady rhythm of Sebastian's heartbeat beneath her ear and the quiet promise in his voice that maybe things could be different. The air around her shifted, his forehead resting against her arm. I love you too, Cass, he sighed. I thought it was rather obvious, pretty much the entire world but you has noticed. A heavy finality laced her words as she replied, It hardly matters now. Sebastian tensed against her but didn't pull away. Why would you say that? It's all that matters to me, at least. Are you Cassandra, she snapped, frustration bubbling over. It was always near impossible for us to love each other, or at least I thought it was. Except it wasn't. But now it is. She could see the confusion etched on his face. He took her cheeks between his hands, forcing her to meet his gaze. I'm confused, Cass. What situation are you talking about? Cassandra frowned, wondering if perhaps he truly hadn't grasped their reality. Sebastian, you're a wolf and alpha, and I'm human. I can't be your mate. You'll need one if you want to remain leader of your pack. I know that. Sebastian replied with a shrug that made Cass want to shake him in anger. Before she could retort, he pressed a hand gently against her mouth to silence her. I already told my pack I renounced my title. Of course, we couldn't possibly live near them or near yours, he added quickly when he saw her eyes widen in shock. You really think I'd let my mate live somewhere dangerous? I'm not your mate, Cassandra said firmly, though a foolish hope bloomed faintly in her chest despite herself. You are, Sebastian insisted. When she opened her mouth to argue again, he cut her off. If you're against that appellation, then I hope you'll at least do me the honor of being my wife. I hear humans are perfectly satisfied being husbands and wives instead of mates. Cass shook her head in disbelief. Sebastian, you can't. You've worked your entire life to become alpha. I can't let you give it all up for me. Her voice cracked slightly under the weight of emotion. And you think I'd let you sacrifice everything for me without doing the same? Sebastian looked appalled. You gave up your wolf for me, Cass, a major part of yourself. If you think for 1 second I wouldn't make a sacrifice infinitely smaller than the one you've made in return, then you're... I'm pregnant, Cass interrupted, watching his face intently. She expected it to crumble, but Sebastian merely looked surprised for a moment before pure joy crossed his features. You are, he asked breathlessly. I may not survive the birth, and even if I do, I won't be able to look after him. Is it mine? The question came out hesitantly, almost nervously. His eyes widened with disbelief and hope. Whose else would it be, you fool? There's never been anyone else. Years later, Cassandra, now Cass, was 22 when I saw her next. Adrian had asked me to deliver a baby gift to her, something he refused to do himself. I suspected guilt gnawed at him for what he'd done to her, though it had hardly been his fault. Just like so many things in life, it was a matter of circumstance. Still, he'd done his best to help her, a fact that still surprised me, knowing Adrian as I did. He didn't usually grant wishes, they rarely ended well for his clients. Yet, breaking the rules so openly for Cass, that must have meant something deeper. Perhaps he'd been fond of her after all. The house where Cass lived was modest yet warm, surrounded by trees that swayed softly in the breeze. As I approached, I caught sight of her through the window, holding a small bundle wrapped snug in a blanket. Her expression was serene, almost otherworldly, as though she radiated an inner peace I hadn't seen in her before. Stepping inside, I called out softly, announcing my presence. She turned toward me, smiling faintly, her eyes tired but kind. Adrian sent this, I said, handing her the package. She accepted it with quiet gratitude, setting it aside without opening it immediately. Instead, she gestured for me to sit. We spoke briefly about trivial matters, the weather, how the town had changed, but eventually, the conversation drifted back to Sebastian. He visits sometimes, she admitted, glancing down at the sleeping infant in her arms. Not often enough for some people's liking. He tries. There was no bitterness in her tone, only acceptance. Whatever struggles they'd faced together seemed distant now, overshadowed by the fragile beauty of new beginnings. Later, as I prepared to leave, I glanced back at her one last time. Cass sat there, bathed in soft afternoon light, rocking her child gently. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked whole, not broken or burdened by the choices she'd made, but simply content. Life had taken its toll on her, shaping her into someone stronger, wiser and more resilient than she'd ever imagined. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Cassandra is holding a 4-month-old baby when I arrive at her home. She looks thinner than I remember, more fragile, but her baby is thriving, as is her husband, so she seems content with how life has unfolded. This is a gift from Adrian, I tell her, handing over a small box. Sebastian eyes it warily, his body tense as if he's contemplating snatching it away, but Cassandra placates him with a single glance. What is it? She asks, her voice steady despite the weight of unspoken tension between them. A promise from him, I explain. Should you or anyone in your family need help, bring this ring to the shop. Adrian will do whatever he can. Sebastian's impatience surfaces immediately. Could we go now and have him turn Casa back into a wolf? He demands, his tone sharp. Days away from surrendering their son to her brother for safety. The strain is evident even if Cassandra tries to hide it. Sleepless nights have taken their toll on both of them. We already decided we wouldn't risk going back, Cassandra says firmly, her gaze locked onto her child. Her resolve is clear. though there's an undercurrent of sorrow that neither of them can fully mask. Unfortunately, this type of request would require you to make a wish, I clarify gently. But if there's ever anything else we can do... Sebastian cuts me off abruptly, his frustration palpable. You've done enough, he snaps, escorting me toward the door. As I step outside, Cassandra calls after me, her voice soft but sincere. Thank you, she says, her eyes meeting mine briefly before flicking to Sebastian. There's gratitude there, layered beneath exhaustion and fear. I see it especially when her gaze lingers on him. She knows he might not be standing here without Adrian's intervention. Watching them, I find myself wondering. Could I ever love someone that much, so deeply that I'd give up everything? Hours later, while closing the shop, the question still lingers in my mind. Have you ever been in love? I ask Adrian curiously, breaking the quiet hum of the evening. He doesn't reply right away, his expression unreadable as he continues organizing shelves. The silence stretches long enough for me to second-guess asking, but then he finally speaks. His answer isn't direct. Instead, he tells a story about choices and consequences, about bonds forged and broken. It feels like a deflection, yet somehow it answers more than words ever could. The next morning dawns gray and overcast, mirroring the heaviness lingering in my thoughts. I'm restocking supplies when the bell above the door jingles softly, announcing another visitor. This time, it's Vivian. Her usual confidence muted by something I can't quite place. She hesitates near the threshold, scanning the room before approaching the counter. I need your advice, she admits quietly, avoiding eye contact. Her vulnerability catches me off guard. It's rare to see someone like Vivian, always so composed, looking uncertain. What's wrong? I prompt, setting down the item in my hands. She exhales slowly, gathering her thoughts. It's Harry's, her voice barely above a whisper. He's been distant lately, distracted. And Emma, well, she notices, but neither of them will talk about it. Concern etches lines around her mouth as she glances toward the window, as if expecting someone to appear. I don't know what to do. We're supposed to be a pack, a family, but lately it feels like we're all just pretending. Her words strike a chord deep within me. Family dynamics are complicated enough without adding supernatural elements into the mix. Sometimes people need space to process things on their own, I offer cautiously. But if it's affecting everyone, maybe it's worth bringing it up directly. You care about them, and they care about you. That foundation matters more than anything. She nods thoughtfully, though doubt still clouds her features. Before leaving, she thanks me, though I'm not sure how much help I truly provided. Later that day, I find myself walking through the forest, seeking solace in the familiar rustle of leaves and chirping of birds. My mind drifts back to Cassandra and Sebastian, to Vivian and her concerns, and inevitably to my own unanswered questions. Love, loyalty, sacrifice, their threads woven tightly into the fabric of every interaction, every decision. Yet for all its complexity, there's a simplicity to it too, connection. Whether it's between mates, friends, or pack members, those bonds define us, shape us, sometimes even save us. As dusk falls, I return to the shop, where Adrian is waiting. Without a word, he hands me a cup of tea, his movements deliberate and calm. For once, the silence between us feels comforting rather than heavy. Whatever answers I seek, perhaps they aren't meant to come quickly or easily.